I think for the time being, that's everyone.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know that people will join every now and again. So what we're gonna do is, I know there's a few people here that haven't been here for I mean, this is some people's first time in the book club. So what we're gonna do is, obviously, this is a very, very, very large book. And first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's actually took the time to read it, especially if this was people's first reading, because this is the largest book that we've done thus far, and it might be the largest book that we will do in the book club in general anyway.
If we do Infinite Jest next year, is it longer, I
Well,
think?
this was the thing. People wanted Infinite Jest, and it's
I won't.
possible, but it requires several months of planning, I think, realistically, things like
Yeah.
that, War and Peace. So the Brothers Karamazov might be the longest one that we do. So thank you again to everyone that actually took the time to read it, because it is quite a tome. So here's what we're going to do. For everyone that hasn't been in the book club before, what we normally do is we speak for a while and then we open up the stage so that people can come on and they can have conversations, they can discuss interesting points. You can just sit and lurk in the audience. It's up to you. You can come and just speak your mind for a bit and then just stay silent. It's completely fine. It's up to you. What we're going to do this time is, we've actually done this on a couple of episodes, is because this is such a large novel to tackle, and because I'm sure all of us have interesting points, what we'll do is Louisa and I will just speak for it, give like a good introduction, because otherwise, if we start bringing everyone in, we'll start speaking about Alyosha and we'll speak about everything at once. So I think, just to like set the tone,
Yeah.
you and I can just give like a basic introduction, what we feel, a little conversation about the points that we found interesting in the novel, and then we can bring everyone into it. How does that sound?
Yeah, I think it's perfect. I think it gives time for people to also warm up to their own ideas and scratch their brains a little bit
Yeah.
with what we have to say.
Yeah.
So let's just kick it off. Can we
Yeah.
do it?
Yeah, yeah. Do
Yeah.
you want to start or do you want me to start?
I mean, I have a lot to say and I know you have it too. So I'm happy to give you the floor first. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the context of it, we've actually read Dostoevsky before on the book club, and we only read Notes from the Underground previously. And we've decided to jump from a novella to the largest novel that Dostoevsky ever did, and it was his final novel. He wrote it in 1880, and it was just a few months before he died of a brain hemorrhage. It's often regarded, and I assume that most people that have read some of Dostoevsky's work think the same, that it is his magnum opus. I think it's the greatest thing that Dostoevsky has written. I would argue that it might be the greatest piece of Russian literature.
Yeah,
It might
definitely.
be the greatest piece of 19th century literature. It really is one of the greatest things ever written. To summarize what it's essentially a familial drama in the guise of a theological argument. That's how I perceive the book.
Yes.
But
Okay.
I also think at the same time that descriptions for the book are too innumerable, that you can't really hone in on exactly what the book itself is about and isolate it, because it's about so many varying
I
things.
think one of our members, Jay, which read the book a couple times already, he mentioned on the literature board, he said this is a Rorschach's test as well. The idea of like,
Yeah.
what is that everyone's going to latch onto in the book? For me, is I think this is a defense of the Christian faith,
Mhm.
but also a defense from someone that is also unafraid of his own scrupulosity
Mhm.
and his own doubts. And I think this is a defense also of the human spirit, you know. This novel hit me like a ton of bricks, I gotta say. It is something is weird when you read, I mean, being so familiar with Dostoevsky like we are, but reading him older as well, revisiting things and now thinking it from a perspective of, I don't know, looking at the world in a different lens, right?
Yeah.
My take is that Dostoevsky is proposing almost a modus of living in here. He picked up something like a Platonic framework of the Republic, the idea of the soul being divided in three parts. You have reason, you have the appetite, and you have the spirit, right? So Plato will put reason on the top. What Dostoevsky does is that he flips this model, right? He puts spirit on top,
Mm.
and he deals with the appetite almost as, okay, I don't want to go so ahead of myself, but he deals with the appetite almost as a fall off of reason as well.
Mm.
So I think you can see the three brothers as a manifestation of almost like one fragmented psyche, you know? So you have the spirit, you have the reason, and you have the appetite. But you can also see it as a coming of age within one person. And the reason I'm saying that, I was thinking about this today, and honestly, like I find it very, very telling how also Dostoevsky structured the age of the brothers. Okay. The idea that Dmitri, which is the closest to Fyodor in the sense of being more of a person of appetite, is also someone that is closest, is the oldest one. Then you have Ivan Reason right in the middle, almost like a stage before appetite. And you have Alyosha as the youngest, childlike and closest to the spirit, closest to a childlike wonder of God, right? And you have the stages of the human being if you don't allow yourself to be fully encapsulated in spirit.
Mm.
And I think that's like, honestly, this stuff makes me really emotional talking about it. I'm trying not to get super emotional. That's why maybe I might be kind of missing my words, but I really see it like that. I see it as Dostoevsky almost making a claim, especially with that ending. The Hooray Karamazov, he's almost making this claim of like, let's be as children again. You know,
Mm.
that's why Alyosha is so close to children too.
Well, one of the things, what the structure of the novel is interesting because it is very traditionally Russian. It's very traditionally Russian literature, and what we find with Russian literature are characters that are almost the idealized version of a mode of thought.
Mhm.
But what's interesting about Dostoevsky, particularly in The Brothers Karamazov, is that he says it himself, is that Alyosha is the hero of the novel.
Yeah, he
And
mentions that even.
and I'm sure, like Jay said, that this is a Rorschach test because the characters often, I mean, particularly as you're reading it, there are certain instances in which I think certain characters are you find so disagreeable towards you. However, by the end of the novel, there's such depth and there's such schism and such contradiction in them that even bar one or two characters, you feel such an affinity with all of them that ultimately I don't think it's unreasonable as to why someone may identify with Ivan or may identify with Dmitri. But Dostoevsky's perspective is that the lesson that he wants us to learn is that Alyosha, regardless of whether he is not the most rational character, he is not the most capable character in many regards. However, he is the best character. And,
Yeah.
and he is the one that we are supposed to aspire to be.
Well, but it's this idea, you know, like in the Bible, to enter the kingdom of God, one must be like children, right? And I think that's one of the reasons that Alyosha is not only the youngest one, he's the most innocent one. He's the closest to a childlike figure,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, that's why he's so close to children as well. Go on.
I mean, I can also just see, like, I'm reading through the chat also, and many people become, like, very, very emotionally impacted by that
Yeah.
ending, and I think it's also part of it. We've got, like, Esteban and Forrest have said that they were brought to tears by it. You and I were brought to tears by the ending of the
Oh, I
novel.
was trembling
I th
again.
and one of the reasons is also because just from a structural, point of view, the idea that you have spent so long with these characters, and it's what I say to you, reading The Brothers Karamazov, you can a lot of people introduce this novel as a very depressing, very overwhelming novel, and it's understandable why, because the novel deals so much in sin, and so many of the characters that you see, it's about their follies, it's about what they fall into. There's so much greed, there's murder, there's lust, there's betrayal, everything that you can possibly imagine that a person shouldn't do, the majority of the characters encapsulate within one another. When you think of a character like Grushenka, it's she may be she is the most irredeemable female of the novel because
Mhm.
she never has any kind of redemption. She never has an act of forgiveness, even when she has so many opportunities to do so.
Yeah.
And so because of that, she never spiritually ascends, which is one of the I think one of the major themes of the novel is that regardless of what occurs in our world, regardless of what is truth, regardless of what is just, what a human being is supposed to do is to spiritually ascend. It's the only form of transcendence that a human that is ultimately valuable and eternal for a human being. But just to mention the ending briefly in relation to that, what I think is one of the most overwhelming aspects of it is because this is a novel and that is so long and trudges through so much sin, trudges through so much agony, that the fact that it deals with as much as it does, the very idea that Dostoevsky can come out the other end of it after, I mean, but we've learned of a new word, Karamazovian. That's how we're supposed to describe something. Karamazovian is an idea that we have that the novel has given us, and that the final lines that are uttered by people in the novel is "Hurrah for Karamazov." We've spent so long thinking everything here, it's so entropic. We're falling into the worst character. We're falling into the worst aspects of our human condition, of our character, that almost make us irredeemable. We've committed so much sin, and yet Dostoevsky has shown in something so pure and innocent that just the act of forgiveness, just the act of love itself, is enough.
Yeah, it's this idea of being open to spiritual permeability, right? Because you have when you have that journey from spirit to appetite, that I mean, Plato doesn't really say as a doesn't say it as a journey, but I think Dostoevsky's proposing as a journey, as an inversion, as a transgression of it. When you have that journey, you start childlike, you start accepting things, you start accepting a closeness to goodness, to innocence, to God. Then the rational materialistic side slowly kills the spirit, and then everything is permissible, and then you become pure hedonism, pure appetite,
Yeah.
right? Pure desire. And I think the culmination of all of that is Fyodor, the father. And I think the novel is also proposing the search for why should I love my father?
Yeah.
It's almost like, Father, why have you forsaken me? It is a Christian question, and it's also the search for father, the the God, not necessarily just Fyodor, not necessarily. It's an emancipation of the self, right?
Well, what do we think about that from a theological perspective? Because, for instance, even biblically, the idea of Jesus on the cross, he says 7 things on the cross, and the idea that one of them is, "Father, why have thou forsaken me?"
Exactly.
It's a moment which I remember, we've mentioned before. We actually went to see, Zizek and Jordan Peterson when we lived in Toronto,
Yeah, yeah.
and, this was one of the features that came up, and it was a moment that you could see Jordan Peterson himself found very enlightening that Zizek, raised, which is that moment in which Jesus is on the cross saying, "Father, why hast thou forsaken me?" The abandonment of the father figure from Jesus, for one brief moment, casts doubt upon himself. And Zizek worded it in that moment, that in that moment, he says he finds that the most interesting aspect of Christianity,
Yeah.
because in that moment, the prophet himself was an atheist because of that moment of doubt. And I think there's something there about this idea about the abandonment of the father, or even so much as the abandonment of the father figure, because what we see through many other characters, particularly with Smerdyakov, who is essentially, as Dostoevsky shows us, is essentially a blank slate. He is a
Ooh.
figure that is open to absorb something. He he
Well,
he is one of the brothers Karamazov. There's not
exactly.
3, there's 4.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to bring it up because we're talking about this fragmented self as this idea of, you know, the almost like a soul trying to find its different aspects. And you have also Smirdyakov. And what is Smirdyakov? If not the excluded fourth Karamazov, right? This illegitimate son that I think in a way represents a form of repressed shadow. He's not fully integrated into the psyche of the three that we're talking about. He's outside of this journey, outside of this coming of ages journey. But he's almost the externalization then of Ivan's ideals as well. I mean, he ends up embodying Ivan's ideals.
What
Go on,
I
go
was
on.
just going to say, because that's an interesting aspect of that, because he is Fyodor's son, but it becomes such a how would you word it, like an ethereal thing. No one really knows if he is his son or not. We all
We
really know.
know.
Yeah,
Well,
we
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 know.
know, but then
Yeah.
because of that, because the father, he's abandoned him in one form or another. He does have to adopt someone, and it's interesting that the person he adopts from that is Ivan.
I find it interesting as well that he is the result of, obviously, his result of rape, which is interesting, is the result of violence. And I think we can talk about his ending in violence as well. But there's also the aspect which I think is very interesting, which is he is the son of pure appetite times 20,000, which is Fyodor, and Lizaveta, which is a character. which is the closest to a holy fool that we have again in The Idiot as Prince Miskin, right? But this
Yeah.
is completely different novel. But in this sense, I think Smirdyakov is also the embodiment of violence, the embodiment of the shadow, the embodiment of something that lies dormant underneath this familial structure. I think it's interesting as well because I was listening to Michael Sugru earlier, and he mentions the name Smirdyakov, and it got me like on this dungeon because I did that for the other books as well in the other book clubs of looking the etymology of the names. And I think, I mean, we talk about that a lot in Brave New World and all that, like the names meaning so much. In this is perfect. So Smirdyakov, of course, comes from smirt or merde in French as well, which is the idea of filth, stink, and shit. The idea of this moral decay almost that is encapsulated even in his name. I think you're gonna love this. Dmitri, from Demetrius, the goddess of fertility and earth, which of course the appetite, the earthly, the banal in us. Ivan, which is the Russian equivalent, and anyone that is Russian might correct me if I'm wrong, of John. God is gracious. John, ironically, the closest to God as well, to Jesus. And this idea, that Ivan is almost the most estranged from his grace, right? And you have Alyosha, which from Alexius means the helper or the defender. So I thought that was very, very fascinating.
And I've just seen Karel also has just posted in the chat. Karamazov itself is black stain.
That's fantastic.
And
Yeah.
I love well, there's an interesting thing as well, just while it entered my head. I love that line also from the prosecution at the end where he says, "In Russia, we don't have any Hamlets, all we have are Karamazovs."
Karamazovs, yeah.
And the irony also, because what we have from Hamlet is that he is the prince in black. There is something. I mean, if I can mention Fyodor a bit, because
yes, I wanted to go to
Fyodor,
Fyodor. Yeah.
what we have to remember about Fyodor is that he's only in half of the novel, but as many father figures,
He's old.
He is constantly alive in the minds, and he is the constant focus of all of the children. And he was a hedonist from the very beginning. And what I find interesting about Karamazov is that he is a hedonist. He's of complete earthly pleasure.
Fyodor, yeah.
Yeah. Fyodor is that. But what I found interesting about Fyodor is that I feel that Fyodor has a sense of self-pity. Is that he has this great indulgence in earthly things, in the material, in just being he makes scenes where he makes himself the fool and whatnot. And
he calls himself a clown constantly.
He plays the role, he puts himself beneath the shoes of everyone, and yet at the same time, he's very, very dismissive of people. He's a character that just seems to go on a whim for what he feels. Yeah, and I find that even though Ivan is supposed to be what many would describe as closest to Fyodor,
I think we were having this discussion earlier. Not only he represents appetite, and by all means, but I think he is the closest in character to how he acts to his father. That's why also they both fall in love with the same woman,
Dmitri.
Dmitri. Did you say Ivan?
Yeah.
Sorry, it wasn't. Yeah, Dmitri. Sorry. Yeah.
But
I mean Dmitri. Yeah.
Yeah. But this aspect of Fyodor, I struggle to encapsulate what he is because I find him so distasteful throughout so much of the novel.
He is.
And in such a small part that he is. And I think the funniest narrative thread of the novel is the money. I mean, we learn by the end everything revolves around money and this mysterious 3,000 rubles that everyone's trying to figure out where it came from, where the 1,500 was split, what Dmitri would have done, and the ending. It's
very innocuous as well.
It is very innocuous. However, from the very, very beginning of the novel, in the opening book, is that all of the inheritance that Dmitri felt that he was entitled to, it was gone right from the very beginning. There was nothing. And I also think, Dmitri, what kind of perception does he have of his father? Of everything that we know of Fyodor, we know he's completely incapable in almost every regard. Why on earth would he think that Fyodor at all would have had any inheritance for him?
The thing that I find interesting is that you said, like, he's only really present in like scenes, he's very little present in scenes, but he is such a brooding figure on top of all the characters because even if he is not a father that was present, or you can even call him an anti-patriarchal figure,
Mm,
like in a Jungian sense, like you can call him as someone that is just source of trauma and basically, but you can see the result of his actions in every single of the brothers, including Smirdyakov.
yeah.
You can see it in Dmitri's rage towards him,
You see it in
and
Alyosha.
yeah, I see in Alyosha moral striving.
Mm,
Is almost like an antithesis of his father because ultimately we're always connected to our bringing. Even if they are in a way, they have all different stories
but
and upbringings
okay,
and all
but
that.
here's something. Here's
I
what I
think they're
think.
all trying. Sorry, what they're all trying to do in their own way is integrate, in a way, their self and their paternal authority
But exactly,
towards God.
but
Or
then that's why I think that there is this inhabiting of a paternal authority, and I think that Dmitri ultimately his problem was that the paternal authority that he inhabited was Fyodor, the
yeah,
same way that the paternal authority that Smerdyakov inhabited was Ivan. And I think that the redemption that occurs, there is a minor redemption for Dmitri at the end of the novel, is when he rejects that. He rejects Fyodor at the end, and he
yeah.
does become more of a godly figure. The irony is that I don't think that Alyosha is close to
You're gonna
Fyodor.
say Father Zosima.
Exactly,
Yeah,
because the paternal figure that he adopted was Father Zosima, and when Father Zosima dies, Alyosha's role almost is to become Father Zosima. The only difference is that he leaves the monastery because that's the correct thing to do,
mm,
because Father Zosima tells him to. If Father Zosima was in the role of Alyosha, he would have done exactly what Alyosha did.
interesting. Maybe. I see that he adopted Zosima as his father figure. I agree, and that's also why his death hits him so hard. But he still kind of follows with the guidance from Father Zosima, right? By going to the world, back into the world. And I think that's very interesting as well, because it almost seems antithetical to what Alyosha should be doing. But
Yeah.
we do know by the end that is definitely what Alyosha should be doing.
Well, yeah,
And
because we also see inside the monastery. I mean, there's all like kind of the internal politics that are going on in there after
mhm.
Zosima's death.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we have also, I mean, Dostoevsky is not presenting a Christian faith that is pure in any case, even in the Orthodox faith.
Yeah,
Because it's interesting because a lot of I don't want to jump through the Grand Inquisitor right away because it's a massive deal and we can talk about it in a long period of time. But there is something about the Grand Inquisitor which is also an indictment of the Roman Catholic faith, particularly the Roman Catholic faith. Much
yeah.
more, I believe, much more than atheism. You know,
I think there's an equivalence between the two. I think because ultimately it is a call out for Christianity, particularly orthodoxy.
Yeah, but exactly. But I don't think that Dostoevsky is also portraying orthodoxy as inherently pure. And
Yeah, yeah, of course not.
he's also showing, when authoritative power becomes something that becomes a question within, when a structure of something, that he talks about the idea of the elders, right? I'm very interested in that because there's also this image of Dostoevsky as someone that was almost anti-West, and because of it, he was anti the Westernization of the Christian faith through the Roman Catholic Church. We can talk about that after throughout the Grand Inquisitor because I think that is so interesting. But yeah, I think if anything, Fyodor is also like there's this parallel of like the absence of any moral authority, because what a father is supposed to be, I mean, in the traditional sense, right, is this pillar of authority in the home.
Yeah,
And Fyodor is not that. He's, as I said, anti-patriarchal. He's a mockery of fatherhood. He's almost like he is a mockery of fatherhood. He does everything. He acts like a child most of the time, but not in a child of pure sense of Alyosha and children,
yeah.
but like as id, pure hedonism, pure appetite. And he is self-indulgent. He's mocking. He doesn't take anything seriously. He throws himself like a clown, but he has this weird thing about honor, which Dmitri has it too, you know?
But it's like a faux honor at the same time.
Exactly, yeah. It's this weird, as I'm saying, it's a mockery of everything that is supposed to be fatherly, right? And I find it interesting that you brought up this idea of Zizek saying that moment of atheism, because I also think that in essence, like you have you have the human father falling, but then God would replace that father, right?
Yeah.
But in here, you have only Alyosha gets to experience that replacement. The other brothers are lost after that, And that's why I think a lot of the novel is also about them trying to find the other parts of their psyche. Even if it's not like spell it out for you, I feel that so deeply now,
Mm.
reading that. And I also see Fyodor as a weird inversion of Abraham. Like really, like he's sacrificing his kids not for God, but for his own benefit. It's very, very strong. And in a way, the sons end up having to sacrifice themselves for him. You know. Do you want to go to the Grand Inquisitor?
We can go to the Grand Inquisitor, and then we can bring some people in within the conversation also. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because the reality is that we will be speaking about this for hours on end otherwise, and the reality is that, like, we wanted to do a, like, full discussion on this, but we know that we won't have the opportunity to do it,
Yeah.
to be able to speak about everything. But yeah, let's speak about the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Let's just start with that.
Well, first off, I think we've spoken about, I mean, obviously, we spoke about the novel together, but I think that one of the interesting things about the Grand Inquisitor in the space of literature is that the Grand Inquisitor is also read outside of the context of the brothers Karamazov. And oftentimes
Very interesting, isn't it?
it's viewed as an look, Dostoevsky was so strongly convinced of his Orthodox faith that the first thing that he asked his wife before they even engaged with one another was, "Do you believe in God?" That was the first question that he asked her, because he couldn't form a relationship with someone on an intimate level if they weren't as strong in their faith as he was. It was something that was such a powerful belief to him. And what's fascinating about it is that the balance of Dostoevsky's writing is someone that creates characters with absolute schisms, wherein, although there is constant strife in between characters, oftentimes the greatest strife occurs within an individual,
Mm.
in them not knowing what to do. Obviously, you think of like Raskolnikov as the archetype of that. But we see that throughout all of the characters, except maybe Fyodor, maybe even Grushenko. We don't see that. But all of the major brothers, we see some element of this. And this is perhaps best shown also within the Grand Inquisitor. And it's not because of the reason that the chapter is so strong is because it comes from Ivan. And what's fascinating about the Grand Inquisitor is that when it's read externally from the brothers Karamazov, it's used as a voice, as an argumentation for atheism. And I understand why, because Dostoevsky, when he writes, he doesn't create archetypes of his characters that have no sway in the way that they live, that have no reasoning for why they live. In fact, one of the reasons why they struggle so much is because they do have so much passion and they have thought so deeply on these things that it's hard to convince themselves otherwise. I find the Grand Inquisitor, I find the parallel of it within the novel is within the final book in the actual court proceedings, when we see a few chapters from the prosecution's closing arguments, and we see it from the defense's closing arguments. And what's the result of it? You have two argumentations, both of which, from the reader's perspective, we have been given the truth. We know what actually happened. So the prosecution's isn't exactly entirely convincing, even though on a moral standing there are elements that are. Whereas in the defense's ones, it is morally just, but there are details of it that we know weren't correct.
Yeah.
And so again, we have these schisms, and there isn't an absolute truth between them, but both arguments are so powerful that what ends up happening immediately after both of those points, we see the audience, we see the people that are within the courthouse, and they react in a way where you hear every possible reaction that you could. You hear a handful of people that are so absolutist when it comes to the prosecution, so absolutist when it comes to the defense. There are people that enjoy the spiritual aspects of it. There are people that dismiss it completely, the anecdotal aspects. And so not only does the story itself come with no absolute solid ground to stand on, but the reaction from it's as though we're constantly in this fluid moving world where truth is this almost impossible thing to latch onto. And I think that the parallel of that exists within the Grand Inquisitor also. And that's the reason as to why the atheistic arguments are so strong. Because if the atheistic arguments weren't so strong, then Ivan and Dmitri and Fyodor, they would just fall apart and they would just be these caricatures which we would pay no attention to.
Mhm.
The fact that Ivan, in creating the Grand Inquisitor, although he didn't create it,
I wanna say that.
yeah, it was his literal Luciferian intellect that created it, an intellect so Luciferian that it may have been a literal devil that came in to do it. But that's what the depth requires, and that's why by the end of the novel there is such a catharsis from it, because we've been treated to some of the harshest argumentations for an opposing point of view, that when we see the celebration that rejects that view, it's all the more worthwhile.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that when people look at the Grand Inquisitor as an isolated chapter, as an isolated story, I think they're missing the context in which the novel is placing that story. I think you have to bring up the devil nightmare, of which in my translation was the devil nightmare, later on Ivan's book. And I agree. It's like I don't necessarily think that is just the externalization of his Luciferian or Faustian intellect. I don't think it's just that bargain. I think it's much more than that. I think if anything, there's even a point that the devil is asking him, like, why would you believe in me but not believing in God, right? Or why would you, like, he's daring him to believe in the devil himself. And I think, if anything, there's a conversation to be held about the idea of original sin as well. When you think of, when you think of when God created the world in Genesis, he says it was good, right? Every day he said it was good until the fall. And then after that, we not only have to bear, shame and the knowledge of good and evil, but we also have to shoulder the weight of freedom, you know, being cast out and being free. And I always I mean, I'm not a big fan of conversations about free will. I've been very open about this on the podcast and in our episodes and all that. I think they usually miss the mark, and there's something so there's something so pure that you're constantly missing, like people are constantly missing, which is also that freedom can be quite heavy on a person.
Mm.
And I'm not saying I side with the Grand Inquisitor and that we must then have an authoritative power that then subjects everyone to an idea of sin and forgiveness that is not really Christ-like, right? But it is also true that freedom is dangerous too to the human spirit, And I think that's an important and valid conversation, you know?
Mm.
Um, do you do you think that, for me, the most important part of that chapter is also the kiss?
In the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah. It got me thinking, because it says all of that, and you have the weight of the weight of free will, you have the weight of, like, all the theological aspect of it. But ultimately, after all of that, what that Jesus does?
Yeah.
He gives him a kiss. And what does Alyosha do? He gives Ivan a kiss. And again, it is the Faustian spirit, almost like, again, I keep saying inversion of something, but isn't if Fyodor is an inversion of Abraham, then Ivan's an inversion of Job, not accepting suffering, of not accepting that the creation is not perfect, is almost to say that authority must replace choice, not necessarily, right? But then when Alyosha gives him a kiss, when Jesus gives the Grand Inquisitor a kiss, is the response, is the real response. There's no argumentation, it's just love, right? It's just solidarity. I have loads of annotations about the idea of suffering, like this kenosis of, like, self emptying, to accept God is also to empty yourself of pride or empty yourself of all of those doubts. Is an act of faith. And ultimately, what happens to Ivan, it's almost like Dostoevsky is predicting the end of Nietzsche.
Yeah.
It's almost Morde ich bin dumm,
Yeah.
it's the end of Nietzsche as
I mean,
well.
this is the thing about, like, again, it does bring it to the platonic ideal of the idea of Kierkegaard, with this idea that, Kierkegaard rejected Plato because he
Mhm.
said that the rationality and faith do not interlink with one another. And it's funny because Alyosha is so absolutist in his belief, and
He's so kind in
but
his belief.
Ivan ultimately isn't absolutist. He really wavers.
Do you know what I think? I don't think that Ivan outright rejects God. I think what
Yeah,
he rejects is the moral order that God's imposing on
yeah,
us. And I
exactly.
think that's a very important distinction. And that's why I think that the atheists grabbing that piece of literature and as their own is a bit silly, because ultimately I still think Dostoevsky's counterpointing much more the idea of the Roman Catholic patriarchal structure with the Pope and all of that,
Oh yeah,
much more. I think where he is really giving a great argument for the atheists is the chapter before, where he talks about the idea of children suffering. He tells those stories that
yeah,
are very heartfelt,
yeah.
and it is almost like atheism as this moral protest from Ivan's perspective, you know?
Well, I think that's where it leads into the Grand Inquisitor, because there is the idea that it's almost like a development of Christianity from the Inquisitor's perspective,
Yeah.
a development of Christianity, because the fundamental aspect of
I
that
mean, to
is that
Roman Catholicism, I think more than
no, from the atheistic perspective,
yeah.
that it would be an indictment of the totality of Christianity, to the point that the Grand Inquisitor, from the atheistic perspective, that it's saying that even someone who represents Christianity can look at the figure of Christianity and say, "You are not enough for the modern world. You don't fit into the modern world. We are
Mhm.
better than you. We've outgrown you."
He does say to Jesus, "We love your creation more than you did,"
Yeah,
right? Like to God. And it's this thing of like Catholicism being the centralized authority, the truth that administrated in these doses. It goes back to Plato. Even if you think about the idea of this like little lies that we tell to keep up people from being hurt. Like that's like Platonic again. And it's interesting because Zosima, one of the things that the Grand Inquisitor touches upon in the conversation, and we know that the devil says, I merely dictated that to you.
yeah,
I think that's fantastic. It's also, again, of the Faustian spirit of the Western Christianity. But that's something that I find it interesting about the idea of forgiveness and sin is that return to Father Zosma chapter, and what did he say? He says, each of us is guilty before everyone for everything.
mm,
And it's this idea of the Orthodox look onto sin, which is very different than ours,
yeah.
Roman Catholic look onto sin. And it's also people have this idea that in Roman Catholicism, that sin is almost transactional, but it's not. It's not transactional. It's not like you can sin and you have a little wallet that you can do and then you
No,
empty it
yeah,
out once you confess. It's not that. That I disagree with Dostoevsky, this vision of the Catholic faith. But I think that the questions of free will, the questions of the burden of freedom, I think those are questions that we can go back to Genesis. Go back to like Adam and Eve, and you can go back to the apple and the knowledge of good and evil. You can really go back to that. There's so much in it. Do you want to bring some people? And then I
yeah.
have loads. I
I
always
mean,
talk about
look.
the onion with you.
Oh, look, we have plenty to talk about, but
Oh, yeah.
I also think that it's relevant to also bring people in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go over to the chat. So let's see.
Is that
We'll
thing
go
on?
in order. Why is it not letting me bring people
Spencer?
in? Wait, they're both there. Any second now. Okay. It's just gonna come two at a time. Okay, perfect.
Hello.
Esteban,
Hello?
hello.
How does my mic sound?
Good.
Yeah, it's good because I'm just like, oh, see, I can hear my echo from your end right now.
Oh, from our end.
Yeah,
Okay. 1 second.
it's pretty funny.
Is it still going?
Yeah, I can still hear it a bit. Wait,
Okay, 1 sec. Can everyone else hear the echo?
okay,
read it.
let me just speak again. Like, let me just speak just randomly and just see if I hear anything. Okay, yep, I can
There's
still
a,
hear.
a little bit, a little bit.
It might just be the distance. 1 sec. I think I might be able to resolve this. Wait 1 second.
It's pretty funny, yeah.
Yep.
That's always
Try now.
okay. Let me see here. Like if I just like speak randomly and oh, by the way, just hello everyone in the audience. Hello everybody.
It sounds way better now.
Yeah, no more echo. Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, yeah, it sounds good. It sounds great.
Good.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, yeah, it's just honestly, because you spoke a bit longer than you usually do with these introductions, like, and you spoke about so much, it's just I'm having a hard time thinking about what I could even say to begin with. I guess all I'll say is that you know, and just my initial thoughts of just for me personally, of course, I really, really adored it, especially after reading all the way back from almost like 2 years ago with Notes from the Underground, and after read Gambler and Crime and Punishment, and now going to here, it's just experiencing the the basically just the viewpoint, the entire world of Dostoevsky. When I think of now, because I think when you say magnum opus for this, I think it is absolutely true in the concrete definition of magnum opus of not only a grand work but also the most important, because it feels like he just allowed himself to be more expansive with all of his ideas, which is why I think like just simply I love this book because this is a true epic in my eyes. This is an absolute epic in every sense of the word, in how I just can't get enough of stories of any kind in any medium that revolve around a giant ensemble of characters, where each character is contrasted so heavily with one another, where it's almost like they are exact opposites. I just find that to be so compelling, and to see everyone from Ayoshka to Ivan to Fyodor to even people like the children, like it's just like every character and every situation, no matter how minor to me, is just something I just find just so emotionally resonant, not just because of its philosophical aspects, but as you said, its moralistic observations when it comes to faith, when it comes to just that the philosophies of living, of secular ideas, of like money, of crime, of like a simple sense of the differences between youth and adulthood. It's all just so like very strong, and I think Louisa was saying how it's a defense of many things. And what I would like to add to that, and I think to conclude, is that to me, it's a defense of earnesty, which is what I feel a lot with Dostoevsky. Like that's what I said. I could think very early on in the very first book club with the character of Lisa from Notes from the Underground, and now seeing this like come full ahead with Ayoshka, is how it's just a pure earnesty in viewing life, and how even though by default we can say, as I've said before, how Dostoevsky is seen as a philosophical writer in the way that he writes narratives. Ultimately, a conclusion that I think is, even though it might seem just especially by its ending with the very end with the children, of how like it seems like the hierarch for Karamazov might seem something like again, like I go back to Notes from the Underground with that hug. It's like I felt such a cathartic release because of that. But and it might seem like it might just be pure sentiment, but to me, I think it just adds to its philosophy. It just adds to something meaningful that it again I'm just speechless, really, to for me.
Mm. It is. It really is like it's quite overwhelming. I find that once you reach the ending of the novel, just because there's so much time that's spent with these people, and you really do know them. They feel like the richest characters that you could ever envision being written, and to have a conclusion to their story, for Dostoevsky to be brave enough to actually conclude and state a point of view and a finale and drawing a line under all of them. It really is. It's like a classical epic in every sense. But Spencer, you were next in, I believe. We'll go in order to try and get everyone.
Hey, yeah,
Hey,
so
hey.
this is my first time reading the book. The last Dostoevsky was Crime and Punishment, and what I loved about this book, just the same as Crime and Punishment, is really is just like how beautiful and loud all the characters jump off of the page in this book. I mean, as a first time reader, we're already talking about like all these in-depth levels that the book goes to, but true to like any really great classic, it's just the storytelling itself is so enjoyable. And it is going to take me like at least another read or whatever at some point in my life to get this depth that we're reaching. But I just like profoundly just enjoyed it as a story. I was shocked at how funny I found some of the parts in it. And really just like how it oh, I'm echoing suddenly. Um, how it paced all the moods in the story. Like, I remember how I felt reading just the chapters that take place in the tavern with Ivan and Alyosha. And, like we talk a lot about the Grand Inquisitor, but even just the chapter before the Grand Inquisitor, where he has like really, all these like sort of excellent problem of evil kind of things that get brought up, and they hit me to the core because he's talking about what happens to that 5-year-old girl, and I have an almost 5-year-old girl. Like, you can't help but like that part just like killed me. Like, I had to close the book for a bit just to take a break from that. You get crushed by that section, and then you move on right afterwards to go to the monastery, and your soul gets kind of like a reprieve in a way, and then there's Zosima's death, which is simultaneously sad and I don't know, kind of funny. Like, is it just me, or is like the chapter about the smell really funny? Like, it's because it's just so ridiculous the way that they talk about it. And and just he just like throughout the whole story, like he's making use of like all these like little details that you're like, these chapters that feel like side chapters, but they reintroduce the characters in such a great way, like Fairpont, where they have him talking about like devils, and then he makes this awesome appearance at Zosima's funeral, and then later we got, Lisa has this like crazy breakdown, and she's talking about devils. It all like every detail feels like it gets used, such a wonderfully appropriate amount throughout the story. You have like little details like when Fyodor's talking about if you're gonna go to, if you're gonna go to Chemachny or whatever that place was called, and talk to this merchant for me, like this is what you have to look out for. And then you got Dmitri trying to go and get the money, and you realize like, oh, that guy, he's in his bullshitting phase, like he's stroking his beard, like you just like I loved those details so much when you're reading those sections. And
it's like there is a kind of comedy of errors for a lot of stuff that goes on, especially because it's like just the characters, they're so rich in and of themselves. Like the idea of Fyodor doing everything, I just always imagine the scene itself. And it's like that right at the beginning where like he's they're all waiting for Zosima, and all they have to do is wait, and Fyodor is there like throwing himself around everywhere. And it's horrible to read, but it's very humorous a lot of the time. And like you said, like the idea of Dmitri initially going to find the money, it's stressful in parts, but when you actually do take a step back, there is a lot of comedy to what's going on.
Yeah, like to be honest, like the whole book that encompasses Dmitri going out to like try and find money, going to just like all these lengths, traveling all over the place, trying to scrounge it up, having like the murder happen. Like it felt like a Safdie brothers movie, and it like I was seriously I was actually just like almost laughing the whole chapter. It was so amazingly ridiculous.
Interesting.
In the best, like that's just remind me because I just saw Marty Supreme not too long ago, and so it just in my mind it was like this is hilarious.
Yeah. There's certain structures I think where there's certain chaotic familial dramas that you might see now, and it's very hard now not to imagine the brothers Karamazov and that kind of
Scenario.
yeah, well, just like the relationship between chaotic, dysfunctional families also.
Yes, and just like, oh my god, like the emotions on display when he's begging Koklikov for money and she's talking about the gold mines and you
Oh
could just
yeah.
see the strain in it where he's like, but the money? Do
Yeah.
you have the money? He's just like losing it. And I was just like, man, that was funny.
It's an anime moment.
I
It was
also find that scene with Miss Koklikova, I find that so frustrating because I also just question like what are you trying to say to him about the gold mines? Why are you like dragging him along about these gold mines?
I know. It's
and it was like,
sometimes you don't.
yeah, it was so funny. And one of the things too is like, there's the little details, but there's also the little bits, there's these like little tiny beautiful parts that are in it. And and the way he builds up to certain sections almost becomes at least transcendental for me because I was reading this in such large chunks. Like it's so hard in the tavern and Zosuma's death, and then Alyosha has this moment where he almost falls, and he has like that tired vision of Zosuma at the wedding feast, which could have been, I don't know, maybe corny if it was handled by somebody else, but there was something so beautiful about that. And probably, like, one of the harder parts of the book for me to read was reading the, prosecution's speech because, like, it's recounting a whole bunch of things that we kinda either know or know aren't true, and that was probably maybe the hardest part of the book for me just to enjoy in general, but the lead up to that, after all the speeches, and you get to Dmitri, and they give the verdict, and he just, like, fully breaks down to tears, like, that part really hit hard after going through all the speeches.
Well, because we see the whole story being recounted as a completely new narrative,
Yeah.
and the prosecution and the defense using psychology to like ultimately say something that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it's these versions of the story that are not matching to what we know, and it's a bit frustrating, isn't it? I actually really like the trial chapter. I thought it was very interesting and quite a quick read actually towards the end because it was a bit infuriating, if anything, because of that. The idea of like those narratives that we know this didn't happen. That's not how it went through. And also what you said earlier, Louis said earlier, this idea that it doesn't matter how we hear the story, every single person is gonna take something completely different out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm really fascinated by that, like different perspectives in storytelling like that.
Yeah, and I think just to, like, finish off the last of my thoughts about it, like, and again, harkening back to, like, all the little details, like, that kinda, like, the just the really quiet beauty of the funeral chapter finishing off the story, and also just that little detail of there not being a smell coming off of the boy.
Yeah, I
Uh,
thought that as well.
I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's brilliant that he brought that back again."
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those are off the top of my head, reading it as quickly as I did, though, all that is basically like my main thoughts I had. I loved it. I loved it. Thank you so much for getting us to read it.
That's nice. I have a question for everyone.
Uh,
But you want to bring Jay now?
It's
Jay
Jay.
perfect for my question, actually.
Okay, Jay.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, like, it's to build up on what Spencer said. Like, thank you for reading it. Right. I was thinking about this for the last couple of days with all the acid episodes, and then what was it, the Godfather review, right? You were talking about the entertain blend of entertainment and great literature, great artists, great things, right? And you did probably compare it already to Karamazov, right? In the video about the Godfather, the idea that it's epic on one hand, but it also for everybody, right? And it's such a pity that this book is not viewed like this. It's not viewed like Godfather, right? It's if you look at the internet, it's like, oh, it's. I mean, even people here mention it because it's hard to avoid even among smart people, let alone on the internet, right? That the idea that you have to struggle through this book, that it's one of the biggest books and it's so complicated, and there's probably some right answer to it, and there's probably something that Dostoevsky wanted to tell you, and you should understand. If you don't, you need to go and read on Wikipedia what it's supposed to mean and stuff like this. But as we've seen right now, right, everybody has their favorite scenes. Like, how often does it happen with books that you just go and like, oh fuck, I love that scene and that character is so great.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, it's so fucking underappreciated, and it's just baffling to me, like, how did we end up in the world like this, right? It's just, it is. I'll just be blasphemous a bit and say, like, yeah, there is War and Peace, where it's great, but the characters they're quite similar. I would say it's like values, fundamental cores are quite similar to each other, and the ideas that he wants to say in that book is quite similar compared to this one, where each character is quite different. I mean, they're dysfunctional, but they're all dysfunctional in their own ways, and it's just so good. And you can read and you can understand some themes, maybe not the other ones, but everybody can get something out of this book, and it's fun to see that my assumptions were like this, and then you can hear people talk about it, and it's just great, right? Like, everybody loves it and have different opinions and different things. So I think it's pretty good. And I know Forrest is going to go next. I think Lisa sucks, so you can go next.
I have a question though, and maybe anyone can answer. Because in the onion parable, obviously, like, we know that the woman is saved by the single charity of giving an onion. But I thought the irony of it is that an onion would be the worst possible thing to give someone if they're hungry. And I kept thinking about that. Does anyone thought about that too? Maybe not. Maybe it was just me.
Well, what I put is the irony that an onion smells, and smell is something that alludes to like moral degradation in the novel. So it's like, there's something about it, right? It's an interesting question, right? An onion, it has layers.
See, I thought that initially as well, and I just refused to say it because I thought there's no way Dostoevsky put in his head an onion because it has layers.
He predicted everything.
But I think also it's that.
I think he is, though, because sorry to cut you off, but like, he mentions how it comes apart, right? Like how she's holding on to it, and that's pointing to the layers. Right.
Yeah. But it's interesting as well because Grushenka tells the story, and I think she's a character that sometimes she's touched by grace, and sometimes she's like seems to have a moment of revelation, but ultimately she stays the same throughout the whole novel. She doesn't really grow, even though she has given some onions, I suppose, throughout the novel.
But that's the thing, it's because, like, to Grushenka, the greatest moral act that she did was give someone that was starving an onion. And can you imagine if that you felt that granted you like some kind of divine justice? Because even the story that's told after that is like the idea of, giving them the onion to pull them out of. Ultimately, like, they're saying, like, what a weak gesture that is in and of itself.
Exactly. And it's honestly, it's an ironic gesture. And I don't think Dostoevsky is an ironist per se, but I feel like also when you look at the chapter of the kids, the book of the kids, and you think of Kolya and that act of semi-charity that he does with the dog, I think it's similar in a way. There's a parallel there.
Yeah, that's its own thing. We can jump onto that in and of itself, but let's give everyone else a chance to speak their mind here. So who's next?
I think it was Forrest.
I'm next. Me. But yeah, like, what can be said that hasn't already about the brothers Karamazov, and even this is like not my first time. I've read it in different translations, and I have opinions on each one, which none is perfect, but like Esteban described this like as an epic, right? It feels like an epic, and what I said to describe it afterwards is that I describe it as a moral epic. It's something in which every single emotion that you can feel has been said about it that you is in the brothers Karamazov, and there's something to identify with everywhere. There's someone that you see in the brothers Karamazov also, and I think that's what makes it such a singular work of art, is that, like, again, it's like this general story, but it eludes so many particulars. It reminds you of so many things throughout your life, and then ultimately the moral at the end is to be considerate, of everybody that it reminds you of, right? Like at the stone. And you know, like I said before, and like I'm typing in chat, you could talk about each character, forever. Like you're talking about the gold mines, like what is she doing? Like, but I think she's actually giving Dimitri like some of the best advice he's ever gonna get. Go and invest in gold. You will be wealthy, by the end of that. If you want to make money, go invest in gold, go work in the gold mines. And he's like, no, I need what's owed to me right now, somehow, to get, what's done in my life because of how irreverent and animalistic Dimitri is. And how Ivan is both this he's rational. Ivan is very smart to the point where I love the fact that Ivan is the brother who like truly wants to be free of his father. And he feels morally guilty about it later on in the novel. um, but he's actually the one who's like smart enough to try to make something of himself with his education. And he just doesn't like his father. And he's willing to like admit that and try to make a life for himself. And when trying to do that, when his father runs into tragedy, he's like, oh, I blame myself. And I put in the chat also that how he's actually one of the most Christian characters because he has this concern for the metaphysical. He believes that he's responsible for his father's death because he wished it, right? Because he thought that he made the wrong move to the right guy. And I feel for Smerdyakov. Like obviously he's the villain. He's born of moral degradation. He's the product of the ultimate sin. Like Fyodor Karamazov was never great in any of his marriages, but this is like the lowest of the low. The fourth Karamazov brother is like, you know, and he he's also like a cook, but he's called Smelly. Like there's some great like irony in the novel, but I also like I part of me doesn't blame Smerdyakov because of how this character Fyodor is such an ass, right? And Smerdyakov is like, fuck my dad. He doesn't fuck with me. I don't have anything. I'm never gonna have anything in Russia by the standards that we have. Dimitri's also a fucking ass who doesn't pay attention to me. You know what? What Ivan was saying, what I think the vibe I caught from Ivan is right. Dimitri's gonna go here, start some shit. I'm gonna fucking kill Fyodor. I'm gonna run away. And I'm like, I kind of like I feel for that. I feel like that's something a normal person like would want to do with their life. Why wouldn't you be even if everything is permissible, why wouldn't that be permissible? Why wouldn't that be allowed? And I think that's also something to kind of discuss about the murder of Fyodor Pavlovich. And then obviously Smerdyakov ends up taking his own life because much like the whole book of Crime and Punishment is going to go over, the murder kind of he doesn't sit well with him, to say the least. and he kills himself, which and I was also pointing out to something. I'm gonna finish by with these last two thoughts, which is the first that they try to solve their problem in the monastery, basically like in a Russian institution. And I love how their personalities like don't allow them to be able to solve their problem at the monastery. Dimitri is irreverent with like the long bow, and nobody gives a shit. Nobody like respects the institution, so they can't actually like solve their problem nice and cleanly. And then, but my favorite chapter is Father Zosima saying to hug the earth like your little Dicky in the Planet Earth music video, to like wrap go and kiss the ground and hug the earth, and love it for everything that happens in it, for all the horrible things, and because of the good things that exist in it as well. And kind of like all what we've said, there's like there's the themes and the moral of the moral epic of the Karamazov is, I think it's this world coming to modernity. I think Louisa was coming at that when she was talking about Nietzsche and the end of Nietzsche. I think Dostoevsky is like pinpointing what Europe is at the time, and we know that the Russian aristocracy likes Westernism. They like the French and stuff. Smerdyakov is kind of like an example of that, and that like this cynicism of atheism is coming, which is basically it's going to become modernity. What do we do? What do we do in the godless world? And I think that's one of the points of the Brothers Karamazov is like, in spite of our doubts, there's still life. You know, like whether you believe in God or not, there's still life, and there's still, which is also a theme in Crime and Punishment. Again, like a lot more, Crime and Punishment is way more particular because it's, you know, like, how do I reconcile with the fact that I killed somebody that nobody likes? But you know, like I punish myself because it's wrong to do it, not because everyone thinks it should be okay to do it. And so, like, in spite of our doubts about God or the imperfections in our religious institutions, there's still life to live. There's still, can you be a vicious murderer for someone who has wronged you and live with it? Can you be um can you be what is it, falsely convicted for a crime that you didn't commit? What are you supposed to do? How are we supposed to live with that? Well, you know, and all of this pertains to truth and the future. And I love that he ends with the children, in which a child is actually dead from disease, you know, from illness, and his friends surround him to like inherit the future. And Alyosha basically gives them an elegy, you know, something. He also gives us a send off into the future with again this idea of Dostoevsky's elan for life, essentially, uh, in remembrance of those that, you know, we've lost and that we've learned from, and how we are to live our lives with concern for others. And that's beautiful. It makes it beautiful. That's all I gotta say about that.
Yes, I would add on by the time that like normally we normally speak back and forth. However, I've just had to mute our thing because I'm aware that we're responsible for a horrendous echo. And so the reason is it's not even the mics. It's because Louisa and I are recording in our living room and we don't have headphone splitters, so we had to play it through a speaker. And we've tried our best to like keep it low and keep it a distance away from the microphone. Clearly not working. So we will pause in between and just let, you know, people have their say. And after we can do a hangout, and I'll go back to the shitty microphone where we can all talk over each other, and it will all be fine after that.
I think Brian wanted to speak next.
Yes,
Sounds good.
Brian, by all means, take the floor. It's yours, and we'll shut up so you don't echo over everyone.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
No.
I hear you
Okay.
perfectly.
Yeah,
fine.
you're good. You're good.
Okay, for sure. First of all, this is my first time reading Brothers Karamazov, and I loved it. I guess no surprise, everyone here loved it. But this is like the third Dostoevsky I've ever read. The first was his first novel was it Portfolk, and then Notes from Underground. One thing I haven't heard someone touch upon, or I don't think I have, is that what kind of I kept in my mind while reading this is like the reason why he wrote this novel. It was because his I don't believe it was the first time, but his like one of his sons had died, and it was his name was Alyosha, right? And he was just like by dealing with that grief, that's where this book like came from, right? And it's kind of interesting that like the most righteous and good character is named Alyosha, and like one of the most detestable is named after himself, Fyodor. Like he has a lot of seems like he has a lot of guilt and doesn't really think very highly of himself, right? Um, a way before I started reading the book, a way it was presented to me, like what the book is about, is if God exists and if God is good, how does one stay good when evil things happen, right? And that's like I was never really religious growing up. I would say probably maybe in the last couple of years I started becoming more religious. I only started going to church maybe like this year, seriously. Like I've like at the beginning of this year, it's like the first time I ever start actually like went to a service and stuff like that. And I've been going consistently for like the past year. And that's one of the arguments that I've heard like throughout all like growing up, like from older people, younger people. It's like, like, why does God let bad things happen? Right? To me, it's like a tired argument. But I've heard it like so many times. Um, so yeah, I think that's what the book is about. Uh, I would say that succinctly is what the book is about. I would say that from my perspective. As far as the brothers go, I don't know which one I specifically identify with. I would say that at different points in my life, I've identified more with uh, each brother. Maybe in my early 20s, I felt like I was a little more like Dimitri, or like teenage years, early 20s, I was more like Dimitri. And then in my mid 20s, I would say I probably identified a little more with Ivan. And now I would say I identify more with Alyosha, or at least I try to be more like Alyosha. And then you have Smirtikov. I say he's a brother. I mean, I don't think it's like it's left up to interpretation, but I think it's very clearly he is their brother. Um, what's it called? Fyodor raped the holy fool. You know what I mean? And uh, I think Louis and Louisa mentioned this that uh, I saw like Fyodor not being necessarily poor, maybe like bad with money, but he's definitely like I wouldn't say their family is necessarily like poor. Like with the whole thing with the money, I saw it as more like I don't know. In my head, I saw it as they did have the means to pay each other off. Maybe not Dimitri, but it was just like they just wouldn't. They're just like stubborn about it. Because Ivan, they mentioned later, Ivan is probably the most well off because Smirtikov makes the argument that even if he turns in the money at the end, they won't believe him because he probably has more than enough of that money in the bank. And I don't know how much rubles are, but in my head, I didn't see it as that much. I don't know. Like, am I wrong? Is 3,000 rubles a lot of money?
Um,
Um, I, Go ahead.
can I add here, or do you want to continue? Sorry.
Oh, if you just want to answer that one, I have a lot more to say, but if you
Yeah,
just
I'll
want to
just
answer
add
that,
on the
okay.
money. that's one of the
It's a
themes of the
lot.
money.
It's
One
like
of the themes of the money is
$100,000.
they critiquing that they're rent capitalists. They're not working. The whole
Yeah,
Yeah,
drama of the family
true.
is they
They're
don't
rent
work.
seekers.
They have shit ton of money and they do nothing and they complain about the money. That's like one of the
yeah,
things that
exactly.
I used to be fascinated before. Like I was like, oh fuck, his like critique of the raising capitalism and people who are not. Uh, they fucking do nothing. They don't work, and then they complain that they have money. Like that's one of the funny
Yeah,
also things, and really frustrating.
exactly.
But yeah, they have a lot of money.
That's the
But
way that I start.
yeah,
100,000, but that's
yeah,
wild.
that 3,000 rubles isn't insignificant. Also, it means that Ivan, before he was 25, yes, it means that he had made himself like a $300,000 fortune
Uh-huh.
from
Yeah,
studying
okay,
law and stuff.
for sure. Okay, that puts some things into perspective for me. And then I kind of saw back to Smirtikov. I almost saw him definitely a fucking manifestation of Fyodor's sin, but later on, like he encapsulates like almost the whole family's like sin. What how he like takes Ivan's words like into action. You know what I mean? And it's expressed that he's like kind of dumb. He kind of takes Ivan's and Dimitri's like words into action. You know what I mean? Like he embodies all that. and stuff. And he's almost, in some ways, to me, an opposite of Alyosha. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, everyone just like talks about doing stuff, and the only people that really do anything in the novel, like take action, is like Alyosha and Smirnikov. You know what I mean? Alyosha is always trying to do good, and Smirnikov does the ultimate evil at the end. And to get to the Grand Inquisitor, great chapter. I think it's kind of weird to me that, going outside the novel, that they just like sell the Grand Inquisitor by itself, like how people like they take the chapter out and people just read it like that. I mean, I would say that that's maybe why people think he Fyodor Dostoevsky was atheist or something. But even within the Grand Inquisitor, I think with the action of the Christ Jesus at the end, kissing him on the lips is kind of like a refuting the Grand Inquisitor, and it's like, to me, I found this kind of funny. Like, the Grand Inquisitor goes on for like 20 pages, like trying to reason why the church is bad. You don't need Jesus. Like, Jesus comes and he's like, you're fucking her shit up, dude. Like, what are you doing here? And what's it called? And how he goes on about freedom. And it kind of reminded me of Brave New World. I was thinking a lot of Brave New World. It's like all people need is bread and comfort, and that's it. And I don't know if they were talking in Russia, if like rumblings of communism was already coming up, because that happened like 30 years later after. But it's kind of like, and what happened in communism, Soviet Union, the suppression of religion, and what's it called, like the state owns everything and they try to like give people a comfortable life and stuff like that. I don't know, it was a little prophetic in a way. Is the way I saw it. What's funny is the Grand Inquisitor goes on for like 20 pages, just rambling off all these things why he's like, I guess, holds in religion, or like why he's anti-Christ and stuff like that. And the only thing Christ does at the end, he doesn't say anything. It's like action, right? And it's just like, no matter how much you try to intellectualize it and stuff, maybe goodness cannot be reason, it cannot to be intellectualized. It's all through action. You know what I mean?
Man, that's
why Alyosha doesn't have great arguments against Ivan. You know what I mean? But he takes action and goodness. You know what I mean? He is trying throughout the whole book. I see it as he is trying to like clear the Karamazov name. He is like going around to all the characters that his brothers have wronged in some way or another, and it's not even like he's not even doing much. He's just like listening to people, and everyone like loves him and stuff. You know what I mean? And then like even the kids, when he first gets to the kids, and the kid almost bites his finger off, and he doesn't react, he doesn't do anything, and the kid's like, "You're Karamazov," and he's saying it as like a nasty thing. You know what I mean? It's just like, "Ugh, you're Karamazov." The whole town's like the Karamazov and stuff. Which makes the ending so powerful when they go hurrah, hurrah for Karamazov and stuff like that. He totally flipped the name of their brother, of their family in the town, and now it doesn't have that nasty connotation by the end. You know what I mean? It's super powerful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And there's a... Oh, I could hear myself.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was just us accidentally unmuting. I will mute it again because I just had something to add, but go on, Gary.
All right. And then there's this whole thing. So money, I kind of saw it as the root of all evil. Okay, it is a lot of money now that I'm informed. But like, they all seem to be doing kind of well for each other. Like, Alyosha is probably, I don't know, the worst off of him because he lives in a monastery. And I thought it was interesting how Zosima was like, remember, you're not better than these people because you have to be here in the monastery because you're unfit. You can't handle the real world, so you have to like isolate yourself. I never thought of that, of monks doing that. It's kind of, I don't know. It's a crazy notion. It totally like blew my mind. I never thought of monks seeing themselves like that. But anyway, there's a whole dispute about money, and then when we go and see the heart of the book, I would say is the family with what's the little boy that dies at the name Ilyusha?
Ilyushka, I think.
Yeah, yeah. At the end, he's like dying, right? And like he goes and sees that family, and like these people are poor, they have nothing, you know what I mean? But look how like the mother is like not all there. The son is dying. The daughter had to be taken out of school, or like couldn't go to school or something. And then the dad is like a drunk. And despite all these things, you could say that father is a piece of shit too. But what's it called?
Like he's an ex-captain.
They all. What's that?
He's also an ex-captain.
Yeah, yeah. But
he's got a good rank.
You know what I mean? They're like way more grateful for everything that they have, and the juxtaposition with the Karamazovs. You know what I mean? It's like what's it called? Dostoevsky always has like an affinity for like the less fortunate, the poor, and stuff like that. I wouldn't call it fetishization of it, but he definitely has like. He sees them as more pure in a sense, or good or something, and I think that's a lot of what he's trying to show with that family compared to his juxtaposed to his family. The characters,
He
I don't know
himself
if I will
has
call
struggles
them
with like money and his
like a lot of
family
characters.
and
I don't know if
court.
neurotic is the right word, but especially in the first half, there's a lot. And the next chapter is them talking about what happened and going over like the nuances of like how did that person say that specifically, you know what I mean, how did it mean and stuff like that. I don't know if that's just
Ryan,
how yeah.
When you said about the idea of poor, that reminded me. I wanted to say something, going all the way back to what we're saying about the like the little anecdote about the onion, because
Yeah.
when I was thinking about that, when I was reading the book, a later part in book 9, I think, right when Dmitri is taken off to the carriage for the trial, there's a really interesting small little moment that feels like I imagine it feels like out of nowhere, where it's about the mother carrying her baby, which is described, the baby is always crying, and it's described as like this type of like peasant, like almost peasant woman. I can't remember who says like, why is the baby crying, what is like happening, and then it's like, I can't remember which characters are saying that, or like which are explaining why, but it's like the fact that he just put that in there, of just a mother cradling her baby, like imagine like in the middle of the streets. It's just like, to me, that's like, that's what I always imagined a lot with the characters in this, and the way Dostoevsky writes in general. It's that, to me, I think that there's something very fascinating of how he takes very broad ideas, borderline archetypes of people, and I think he does two things. Either he tries to deconstruct that, or he embraces the fact that a quote, an archetype can also be a symbol. And what is a symbol but a very powerful message that it's just explained like very in a very broad sense, but not in a way that is just like meant to be like dumbed down, for a general audience, for commercial value. A symbol, like the best symbols and the best ideas expressed just with an image or a simple thought, is just about expressing a sincere belief. And I think that the fact that he just put it in there, I think in a very profound way, where it's just, here is a mother cradling his baby, her baby. Sorry, it's just, and then, like, that's all. That is all.
You know what's interesting is how the Karamazovs don't have a mother figure, and it goes back to me saying
Exactly.
uh, um they're like Alyosha and Smirkov are kind of opposites. And what's it called? We know about Smirkov's mother like the most. Was it
Yeah.
called? When she was a mother in the street and stuff like that. And then Alyosha has a vivid memory of his mother in like the first chapter of her, like the light striking her, and he remembers
Yeah.
that she looked like the Virgin Mary, is how he like puts it and stuff like that.
You know what's
So
also
Their
yeah,
mothers
it,
are
interesting?
idealized,
yeah,
like to go on from this story. And he I that the thing with them that was always peculiar to me is the what's Karamazovian about them is like for Dimitri, for example, and it's actually mentioned at the trial that like Grigory actually raised him and he has like no allegiance to him.
no, not
Like
at all.
Grigory and what's Grigory's wife's name? I forgot.
Tabula.
That's Karamazovian, you know, like his like disregard for
The
them
disregard.
as the people who actually like gave him a life, who raised him or whatever, and then he's chasing what's owed to him from his mother's estate, which by the end of the novel everybody's like, no, yeah, it probably should have belonged to him, which is like I always thought that was pretty interesting. But the other thing that about Dimitri's character, because Dimitri is also, we all know a Dimitri is like like someone who's just so like so intense, so like passionately like steadfast in what they do. I think a really good description was tempestuous, like tempest, like he's a storm. And he but I love the fact that Dimitri got his first fiance, like it came from an act of generosity from
Oh yeah,
from his heart, like an impulse from his heart to help this woman that he loved.
that kind of
And
goes back to
like,
the Onion. They're like parallels.
yeah, yeah, and that in doing so, she falls in love with him too. And there's obviously some falling out of love or some remaining in love from both of them, and few and far in between. And how he wants to use that to bow to her, in a sense, like bow out to
Hmm.
her and go with Grushenka instead. And like and then she ultimately she is probably the reason he gets convicted, which is why when she
Oh
goes to
yeah,
see him in the jail at the end, and then Grushenka comes in, and kind of
isn't
they have a
isn't
bit
that
of a
like
tense moment.
isn't that like one of the points where they're like works in his favor in his character is how he gave her the money in the trial? I feel like that's like one of the few points where it's just like, well, kind of like he obviously is not that tight with money if he was able to give it away to someone in need like
Right.
that, right?
But
Yeah.
it's like the thing that also gets him Katya, who like, it's funny because Katya would also actually be a better marriage for him. She's from like a
Yeah.
noble family.
Yeah.
Ivan realizes this, right? When he swoops, he knows that he's got to secure his future. Um and like, you know, um uh and but I always like that his like impulsiveness both leads to everything good in his life and everything bad in his life. He's appetitive, as I think Louisa would say.
Yeah.
He's like, he only works on on what he sees right in front of him, which is why he ignores the gold mines advice. And this this appetite, this intensity, this personality that he has, I think it's so vivid, it's so I can see this person. I can see this person like getting drunk and like maybe grabbing you too hard and their intense love for you or whatever, you know? Like he's the type of guy who would hug you too hard. And like his relationship with Katya and then later with Grushenka. And I think Grushenka is like a great foil of this too because she's also super inconsistent and impulsive until eventually I guess she sticks to Dmitri, but her freaking the way she feels about people changes constantly on a whim. When we first meet her with
Yeah,
Katya, they're buddies until she
that was the
insults her
funniest scene
and
to
goes
me.
off. You know, she says, "Oh, I hate Dimitri. And then I love Dimitri. Oh, I hate my former lover. Oh, I'll forgive him
Yeah.
to
Like
start
that
a new
entire
life."
conversation she
Like
has with Ayoshka, I think book like 10, I think, or something like that.
she
Where like,
yeah, she comes off as so inconsistent. And so I think she is a feminine foil of Dimitri. They are both they complement each other in the sense of
Yeah.
this impulsivity
yeah,
I guess of a type of character, of a type of relationship in Russia, whereas Ivan, again, as a character, is all tactical concerned. He sends the two 5,000
Yeah,
ruble notes. He wants to plan his marriage. He goes to university. He goes to the city, and you know, it's like all these different virtues and vices come out, and then we have and Alyosha, who you've already elaborated on, but this impulsivity of Dmitri and what it has brought to his life, I think, is so like it again. I use the word beautiful like loosely, but it's the brothers Karamazov, so I don't really care. But like you know, this emotional, this pathos, this beauty of pathos that he has and the way that he lives his life. Like he beats his freaking chest, right? Which ends up becoming
yeah.
evidence towards the thing while he's talking about how he's not going to be a scoundrel. He doesn't make any fucking
yeah,
sense, you know? Like,
yeah. It's like I'm a scoundrel,
But
not a thief.
it's exactly what he is though, because like he is pure appetite. I mean, one of the things that he has in common with his father is that like he's not future orientated. He just thinks of the now, and it's why him and Katya match so much. Is because on a whim,
Mikchenko.
no, I think him and Katya match so much because
Interesting.
the idea that like at the end when she goes to visit him in the hospital,
mhm.
it's this idea that it's like, yes, I did think you were guilty, but as soon as I was done saying it, then I didn't think you were guilty anymore. I promise you that. And it's just like this idea that I think that I mean, as you said, because yeah, Dimitri I think is a better match for her because I also think at the same time, who would be a good match for Grushenka? Like I imagine that scene, where Dimitri has gone over to their house and you've just got that image of her like dancing, waving her handkerchief, and those Polish guys that are fighting. I just think she's such an extroverted person that just requires attention on herself. And I think the impulsivity of Dmitri and Katya is actually the reason why they come across as more redeemable, because this idea that yes, they have all the flaws, but because they do flip-flop between them both so much, there is always going to be the propensity that they can
Ah, I
eventually,
see. You mean the
yeah,
impulsivity of
yeah,
Katya, as in at the trial, how she
yeah,
I
yeah,
Yeah.
see. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
They do have the
Okay.
potential that at any second they can turn and
They
say the right,
volatile,
yeah,
yeah.
they can turn and say the right thing, whereas Grushenka, she's steadfast in being selfish. Like she's not as impulsive as the others. She's a bit more she's kind of standardized in her worldview. She's quite consistent. Whereas Dmitri and Katya, just the
I
fact that they can change can also mean that they can change into something righteous.
I think what you're to describe what you're saying is that she's consistent, but she's dishonest,
Yeah.
right? There is something that she does ultimately want, even though she manipulates people by like flip flopping, and she wants to ruin
I mean, like
Alyosha.
to me, like
What's interesting is she's also like quite clever, right? She becomes kind of like a bookkeeper for the moneylender, and like she makes herself like a small fortune doing so. Uh, and also like the shade thrown at America at the end when they're like, we're gonna
Yes,
go.
when Dimitri's like, I want the Russian god. It's like the American god's not enough. I want the Russian god. I love that.
Shit talks America for no reason.
Interesting that nobody ever talked still about Nikitin, right? Like more or less
Oh,
all
yeah.
the main characters were mentioned, but
Rakitin,
Rakitin. Sorry, I fucking hate
he's
the guy.
vile.
What a
Yeah, he's
I
piece of
horrible.
fucking hate
Oh,
shit.
him.
he's disgusting.
He's also a cynic. He's a coward though. Sverdyakov at least had the balls to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's just like he's everywhere. Also, everybody knows him. He's everywhere in all the conversation with all the people. Like people come out and he's like, "Oh yeah, he was here before," and like he was at Dmitri, he was at her house and her house, and just wanted
my
to
God.
marry the older Hakhlakova for money as well. He had a plan with poems. I'm like, what an asshole! Just
What
hating
about
so much compared
the
to everybody
poem
else.
that he made about her feet?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so
Oh,
gross.
oh my God.
Her feet that she can't always use. Right? That's the irony of the poem. I think that he's making an ode to something that she's handicapped with. So she fucking doesn't have agency over.
I think like particularly in the beginning of the novel, what I find is how isolated Alyosha feels, because one of the propensities of all the characters, including Dmitri, including Fyodor, is that everyone revels more so than feels any other kind of emotion that something bad has happened to someone else. That seems to be the one consistent thread with all the characters. Like, the scene when Grushenko betrays Katya by like saying that she was going to kiss her hand and then doesn't.
Yeah,
And showing it, like when Alyosha tells Dmitri about that, rather than thinking, "Oh, what a horrible thing," he envisions it in this way that it's like, "Oh, she's so feisty, that
she's
one."
a she-devil. Yeah.
Imagine how bad she must have felt about that.
Yeah.
I love it. I think I wanted to like also talk extendedly about Father Zosima and the
Yes,
prayer, the
please.
theodicy, not the prayer, but the theodicy, the eulogy, the last words that he
just
has.
book 6, because book 6 is just Zosima. It's just Zosima right there.
Yeah.
I have a lot of
in
thoughts.
his like
I have
in his what are they?
It's
Please
while
elaborate.
you're remembering, that's one of the themes that Brian mentioned and also Spencer mentioned, I think, in the chat. Multiple people mentioned. I was thinking about this is about the whole action and thinking, right? Like you can, it's just the theme that was connecting everything for me this time, and you can go like, oh, you compare one brother who is rational Ivan to sensual or whatever. Dmitri, or to the more acting Alyosha, and you can see how Zosima told Alyosha, like, oh, it's time for you to go out. You cannot stay in the church. You need to go out and do something. And you can see it in the rivalry with Fairpont and Zosima as well, where you're talking about, oh, you can be sitting as an ascetic here and talk about devils and not be useful to the world, and it just be offended that everybody likes this other guy who's, oh, how dare the Zosima talks to ladies and take presents and drink tea with them, and like, what is the real church? What is the real religion? What is the real action? And I'll just bring it back because it was a long time ago, but I just always forget to mention that for me, the action of the keys is all about the action, right? Like the 50 pages of rambling and reasoning. You can reason yourself into anything you want. You can rationalize anything you want as long as you want. You can do this, or you can just act and do things. And it's just like simple answer from the Jesus, simple answer, and then simple answer from Zosima. It was in the beginning of the book, I think, where the whole Hakhlakova changed when she's like, oh, what am I supposed to do? The world is bad, everybody's dying, and then there's sin, and how can God permit it? And Zosima pretty much tells her, like, yeah, just don't fucking think about it. Like, if you think about it, yeah, you're gonna rationalize yourself into evil. But if you don't think about it, that's a whole different question. And I think that was one of the main revelation for me on this read is, you can rationalize existence or not existence. Yeah.
Funny that you mentioned that, because like,
just stay 1 second because I want to say something. There's something interesting about this as well, which is like ultimately, like when we read Hamlet in the book club as well, I remember like when we had this conversation about the idea of rationalizing or talking yourself to anything or being able to say anything and get yourself in this almost this ego trip. And I just want to bring back something that I annotated when Forrest was saying, because I thought Forrest really picked up when I was heading towards Ivan's particular demise and like this almost like parallel with Nietzsche and how Nietzsche was after he lost his mind. And I think the irony of it all is that Smirdyakov, he tells Ivan, like, why do you feel so much guilt about this death? If the logical conclusions of your ideas is that if there is no God, then everything's permissible, then why this guilt? Why should you feel like that? And in a way, I think that the liberal project is a bit of an attempt to rekindle this Christian morality, but without a God overseeing it, in almost like in a Milton sense. And the devil in here, when he comes back and he talks to Ivan and he says, "Oh, I dictated that to you." He's also not accusing God. He's just accuses humanity expectations of what God is supposed to be. And if anything, the kiss from Alyosha, like the whole point is that Alyosha never has to question himself. He never has to engage in a Faustian bargain, or he never has to even entertain the idea of the devil. He just does what's right. He always just acts upon what is the righteous thing. And it's interesting because I think in the last episode of the podcast, we almost had that conversation as well. And the idea of people can change if they cannot. And one of the conclusions we got as well is that ultimately just goodness, you just have to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly why I think the reason why I love Zosima's speeches in chapter 6, I mean in book 6, I think on a spiritual level, on like a full-on thematic level, it is a battle against the Grand Inquisitor and everything he represents, even if he doesn't know it, because if anything, everything he said right there made me fully convinced that the Grand Inquisitor is the most pretentious thing ever. And it's like, why should I care? Because now I'm realizing how it's just nonsense. Because to me, like, when I think about the Grand Inquisitor and the representations and about everything that relates to it, especially of the idea, I think of a materialism that is absolutely the opposite of transcendental that we all talk about. I think the reason why we're so drawn to transcendental ideas is because it's the most selfless act that people can give by knowing that there is something so beyond us. And I think especially with selflessness, of knowing of a selfless ode to something of God, because God, like, no matter what, no matter if you are in any religion or in any possible idea of the world or of any possible like aspect of life, God is something that can never ever be materialized. We shouldn't let it be materialized, and we should never let ourselves think that we are basically playing God. That's a constant theme throughout all of like very, very powerful storytelling, is of characters who really want to seem like they play God. And I think that's what the Grand Inquisitor really tries to do, because like he is a very selfish, he's a symbol of a selfish power in which he tries to have this veneer of knowing what's right for the people. But after reading everything that Zosima says, in which like it is the most sincere ode to, like, especially I wrote two things down which I want to recite gracefully. I think when he speaks about this, he battles with this idea that, people, like, maybe they shouldn't, maybe it's not like complete freedom, because like that is something that I still have a bit of confliction on. But like, I think people, when they say freedom, they at least want something of knowing that they can live, like knowing that like they don't have to like always be scared, all the time unfairly, that it's something fair. Like there comes complications of, the freedom, like when it comes to fairness of, say, like power, or say like influence, or say like, oh, who gets this, who gets that, or like, the equality, democracy, all that stuff. But I think people are just so broadly scared of this idea of like just impure enslavement over something that really doesn't like from a source like I think like the Grand Inquisitor that clearly does not deserve it, and thus like that's why like when he speaks to the Christ, like how he is justifying everything. We keep on saying this. It's like the message is that all of this that he's trying to do, the real powerful conclusion that everyone is talking about is just an action of a kiss. And I think that's like, and, you know, that's why like in turn when Zosima speaks, and it's speaking of something so powerful, and if you will allow me, I want to recite two passages, if you would allow me. For one, like when he says, "Brothers, have no fear of men's sin. Love a man even in his sin, for that is the semblance of divine love and is the highest love on earth. Love all God's creation, the whole of every grain and sand in it. Love every leaf, love every ray of God's life. Love the animals, love the plants, love everything. If you love everything, you will perceive the divine mystery in things. Once you perceive it, you will begin to comprehend it better every day, and you will come at last to love the whole world with an all-embracing love." And another one that I think just like it's just a complete like defeat of the Grand Inquisitor, of the pride of Satan, what I think is this: it is hard for us on earth to comprehend it, and therefore it is so easy to fall into error and to share it, even imagining that we are doing something grand and fine. Indeed, many of the strongest feelings and movements of our nature we cannot comprehend on earth. Let not that be a stumbling block. And think not that it may serve as a justification to you for anything. For the eternal judge asks of you what you can comprehend and what you cannot. You will know that yourself hereafter, for you will behold all things truly, and then you will not dispute them. Because that is something that really shows a powerful like thing of how, you know, even in our secular world, even if we try to ignore it, the world around us, we can always utilize aspects of a transcendental symbol, like the ideas of rituals, the idea of faith in something, the idea of believing in something. It's always like there. It's always going to be there. And it's like, because like it is like almost this like a thing of how like we are one. We are one with nature. We are one with God, and thus, you know, God. And of course, like in Genesis, like in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth in His image, and that might mean two things, as I said, I think in Blood Meridian or some other book club, of how, you know, we may be as transcendental as God, or God may be allow Himself to be as human as us. I think it can be both ways at this point, because that brings something meaningful, and like that shows that we serve each other. We serve to know that that is a powerful philosophy that maybe can seem naive. Maybe can, like as some people have said, maybe it can seem naive that a broad absolutist idea of anything can change, anything can be like placed back into the way it was. But I know for now it is something that allows me in particular to know that sincerity of knowing that we actually care about the earth that we live in, that we actually care, and we pay attention, just acknowledging and fully submitting that we have this beautiful world and we have these beautiful people, rather than saying, oh, I can protect them like by quote unquote doing these things that are basically enslavement, because really I only care about myself. Because I think we come to this point of like, because I think when we have that, I see that a lot of how people like start off like thinking, oh, I can help, but it comes more and more of just a material need of power, which is a selfish power. Because I think the selfishness can become so like related to materialism, like as we see with so many of these characters in the story, as we see with so many things, even in religion, even in the idea of a monastery, even in the ideas of the Catholic and of these institutions, and of what you said earlier of the Pope. You know, these can be related to like a materialism that takes away from acknowledging any source that is beyond that. And so that's why I believe that Zosima wins because he acknowledges something that, that's why he passes on to Alyosha right before he dies, that he must pass on into something that is beyond on the monastery, because the monastery, as much as it is related to of faith and of the transcendental, which is of the heavens, of God, it still is tied to our earth, and that has its limits. You need to do something even more than that, which maybe even is truer to being a Catholic or any faith that you associate with. And I think because Ayosha leads into that, that's the last reason I'll say. That's why Zosima wins and the Grand Inquisitor is defeated.
Yeah, that's very nice, Stephen. I think you got into some beautiful points there. There's something also like that is so powerful about just existing in dual, like in counterpoint to the secular society of the materialistic society. And I think Alyosha, a lot of the times, he's just being himself, he's just being there, and all those characters go through so much turmoil, and he seems like this steadfast, like moral compass, and this steadfast tranquility almost in the face of so much. I love it. I think it's so beautiful.
I think adding on to that, there in the last chapter, there's something that I think of it more of as an existential thought experiment on the brotherhood of everyone and consideration for everybody. Which is at the end when Kolya asks Alyosha, oh, is the second resurrection really going to happen? Like, are we going to resurrect one day and like be in harmony, like as Christians and in the new Jerusalem, right? Um, and Alyosha says like, yes, of course, and like, um, um, I don't think that's so much as of course that's obviously like Christian catechism and like that's the eschatology of Christianity, but more so if you because I'm not necessarily Christian, but I think if you think of it in the terms of if if we were to be if we were to all resurrect at the end of time, at the ages of ages, and have to tell each other about what we did when we were gone, right? This is, I think, an existential utterance. This is kind of, it reminds me the idea of Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, the idea that
Yeah.
you have one life that you're going to live it again, so you make sure that the decisions that you make are important and steadfast. And like this is I liken it to Koya and Alyosha's conversations at the end, and Dostoevsky basically reminding us to think of the world that way. Think of that at the end of time, you're going to have to explain what you did, and uh, will you be happy with that? Will will we revel at the stone? You know, around Alyosha's stone, and that is supposed to be a reminder to act with virtue, you know.
Yeah. And it's interesting because
And
a lot of like the understanding of the modern man of orthodoxy is this whole like death to the world thing. And what Father Zosima, which is part of it as well, right? But Father Zosima tells Alyosha, go into the world, go and show the world through your actions, through your goodness, what it is to be a true Christian. And I mean, that is the crux of it. I also find it so beautiful that in the end, like the funeral, even though it's sad that the little boy has died, there's also so much joy in knowing that he was a true good spirit and that he's going to leave a mark that is just pure goodness onto the other children. And I find that so beautiful.
I also found that the parallel. There's two parallel deaths that occur at the end of the novel, and that is the unseen death of Ivan, which is an inevitability, and we know will happen, and the death of Ilyusha. And the thing with Ilyusha's death is that there is such a it's so tragic. I mean, even the descriptions that Dostoevsky uses of like his hands looking like a marble statue, and you've got his father, the second grade captain, who is like I mean, literally close enough imagetically, like clutching to an onion, in the sense that, like there's flowers falling on the snow, and it's like every petal and every stem feels as though it's so sacred and possesses all the importance in the world. And we contrast that with this joyous thing of the hurrah for Karamazov at the end. And that's because ultimately the boy, and even the second grade father, who they say he's a drunkard, he's a sinner, the fact that he appreciates and understands the spiritual transcendence of the son, that is why there's joy at the end. The irony is that Ivan makes the decision in the trial that he doesn't fully commit to that act of justice, to that act of truth, that he can officially discard his rationality and just do something that's right. And as such, even though Ivan's death is not as tragic, because it's also anticipated more than Ilyusha's, his death is seen as something that could have transcended, could have been something everlasting, but he's kind of trapped in this temporal limbo where he's neither dead nor alive. And yet, when we look at Ilyusha, we look at someone who has died and at the same time has a new eternal life.
Yeah.
I think it's even funny just thinking about what you said about the boys saying like hurrah for Karamazov, because if you think about like the whole book, like you would never think that someone would say that sentence. Like I know that it's referring to Alyosha, who is the most beloved of all of them, but just saying that in general, because that name just carries so much taint to it throughout the book. The fact that at the end you would have people actually cheering hurrah for Karamazov at the end is so funny.
Yeah. I think that is actually like, I don't even think it's irony. I think it's the redemptive nature of what Dostoevsky was going for. I think it's this idea that we've experienced so much sin, that we've experienced so much hardship, all because of this family. That just these simple actions. It's like what Jay was saying. Just the act of acting in goodness is enough to redeem all of it. It would all be worth it.
Yeah, I literally
Speaking
said
of,
in the chat that I think I said to George how like I was literally searching for any semblance of irony to come from that ending, and that's what made me cry, because when I realized there was, in my opinion, there was absolutely none, because to me, like I think because of Alyosha, I think when Alyosha especially says that there is a resurrection, that there is an afterlife, that we as we always said with Ilyusha, that there is, like, he was a pure child. That's like, there's that, again, as I said, there's something beautiful in just
you'll have to explain yourself to him, in essence, is what he's saying. As you live your life. But continue.
Like, yeah, it's a beauty, and that's why, like, I don't think it's ironic. I think like that the whole point is to escape the trenches of the darkness that is like of that familial legacy, because that, like, a symbol is able to evolve.
I think
The
also to
Go ahead.
the point, the Grand Inquisitor, going back just really quick, I think that because Jesus came and suffered for us, I think the story of the Grand Inquisitor also loses a lot of its strength, in the idea of suffering as well. I don't want to go so like Catholic here, but I really do like believe that kind of makes it all kind of irrelevant to our suffering, like.
Yeah.
That's why I said it's pretentious, because like
Exactly.
it's like it seems significant, but again, Jesus's kiss is basically the kiss that makes us all remember nothing he said was significant whatsoever. It's the literal definition of pretentiousness.
The other thing, I think Louis or Louisa was pointing it out, that he also, like, he was anticipating, because there's this idea of rationality in the book, like we've already talked about, with rationality versus passion, or versus like metaphysical truth, and how they seem to be like contradictory at times, and how do we like reconcile that. But it's even beyond that, because Dostoevsky is also kind of like, he's anticipating the pseudoscientific when he
Yep.
says like psychology is a stick with two sharp ends. is saying essentially psychology is something with unfalsifiable conclusions. And this book is written what, like 30 years before Karl Popper essentially like academizes that the idea of psychology being that way. And I think that everything is very prescient. It's almost like he's and again I say this, but he's anticipating modernity and
Yeah.
already answering the problems that are going to come with it. And I
It's
think that makes the book very powerful. And I think that's why it stood the test of time so much.
You know what's interesting about Ivan and Dmitri is I would say they're like complete opposites, right? Like one is super like intellectual, and the other one is just acts on emotion, basically. You know, and
Right.
at 2 points during the book, they both like state that they want to kill themselves. Like Ivan, before the Grand Inquisitor, he says when he reaches like 30 or something, he's gonna kill himself, and then Dmitri also says, I think at a few points that he's gonna kill himself, and it's just like, is it because they're like Dostoevsky's trying to say like, no matter which path you take away from God, I suppose that it like ends in like destruction or like your self annihilation or something. I don't know. That's
Mhm.
a thought that I had throughout
I
while
actually
reading it.
I actually forgot the reason that we disconnected from the microphone and put it on here was so like we could actually engage more because I actually forgot to mention Brian, something that you mentioned earlier in relation to the Brothers Karamazov having similarities with Brave New
Mhm.
World is that I don't know if people remember, but the role of the guy who runs the major ministry in Brave New World, his role is the Grand Inquisitor.
Really, I was wondering where I heard that before, like before this book. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, so it must have
I
been
don't
there.
think it's like I don't think it's good fortune that he picked that name. I think it's a
Hmm.
very conscious decision.
I
Interesting.
have
Yeah, but
a question for the audience and maybe for Forrest and people in general. So we were talking about the whole loving man and scene and loving your neighbor and all this stuff, but how how do you do it? How do you start? Like for example, the Forrest mentioned that Lisa is a good character, and I just hate her. She just I thought it just she's a rich kid,
Of
very
course.
manipulative,
Yes.
lies to everybody, does a lot of bad stuff. She is to the sweet Alyosha, she backstabs him in the back, pretty
She's a
bad.
little
To the sweet
she's a
Alyosha.
little,
She's a
little
And
bitch.
she's still
princess.
young and supposed to be innocent, but she's already very spoiled. You know, I'm like, I don't know
She's
when do you
dangerous,
start? Like,
man. She's
yes,
she's gonna ruin
she's
someone's life.
I'm sure she would really
exactly.
love.
So how can you
I'm sh-
explain to me how do
she's the type
does
of
one
girl
start
that would
loving a
really love
person
to
like
read
this?
Kafka.
I'm hypnotized by her charm. I read her and I just can't help but love her.
I
Yeah,
see.
I
Okay,
like
so
her too,
it just proves
Forrest.
my point.
That's
Just proves my
yeah,
point. Okay, thanks.
that's like the excuse that Dmitri would use with Grushenka.
Hey, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe there's anticipation there, you know.
What do you think? Like you can change her?
I can
Yeah.
fix her. I can fix her.
I
Yeah.
think her ending. Her ending as well, when she's like basically like hurting herself is kind of strong though.
Yeah, that's true that she closes the door on her finger.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of sad.
Oh my
It's kind of
Yeah, it's
horrifying.
very
Exactly.
sad.
Yeah.
You just feel a bit too sorry for her, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
A victim
There's
of her
something
own
about her that
demons.
just like comes off as like I don't know, a fucking a yandere, right? Like a
No way.
That's it,
No.
Elisa
you
chan.
know?
No.
Yeah.
No way. No way would you say that. No way would you say that. No way would you say that.
But
No way.
but Jay, so like
I kind
what
of
was
regret asking now.
I was gonna say so like what were you saying? Were you just asking like could people
No,
ultimately change? Is that what you were asking?
no, 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 no. No, just like kind of general. I'm working it out, and I know it's not a psychology freaking club. It's a book club, but we're already talking about this, and we talk about it. You kind of mentioned it. Maybe you have not a practical guide, but how do you
do you deal, like a lot of people suck, right? And then how do you start loving your neighbor? And it does mention in the book you're supposed to be responsible for other people, and if they suck, it means you also suck, and it means you need to help them because you suck, because you need to help them. Everybody connected, right? Things like this, and you're supposed to live your life like Alyosha, just be present for people, even for your shitty brothers. But it's quite complicated. I guess that's one of the answers of the book. It also tells you like it is hard. It's a lot of work, and you have to do it step by step. But I just wonder, maybe how do you do it? Maybe you have some anecdotes to tell from your life. I just
Yeah.
and I
And
thought
that's a
start from
great
there. Maybe
question.
somebody has something
Ask
interesting to say.
ask someone, hey, tell me an episode of virtue from your life, And it's
Why
like,
not?
you know,
Are we just all reasoning
and
and nobody's just doing any action? That I just want to catch you on your old bullshit.
well, I'm thinking in the sense that it's hard, it's complicated, right? Because you can, especially if you can be so cynical of modernity, especially post-modernity, that the idea that turning the other cheek, even loving your evil brother, will just lead to your demise. You know what I mean? Will lead to your ultimate destruction, which I think is even a more popular take. But again, in the words of like Marcus Aurelius, who was channeling Socrates, right? It's the belief that you cannot be injured, that physical injury is not as important as metaphysical, the maintenance of your soul. And obviously, whether you believe in a soul or not, people still believe it sort of in metaphysics, right? And sort of like the ethics. There's all sorts of different atheist ethics and metaphysics, and then there's obviously the more popular atheist denial of metaphysics in general. But it all comes down to essentially whether you do believe in a metaphysical truth. And even though I'm not Christian in the sense that I don't believe in God, which I think makes me in the minority here, I still ultimately do, like, for whether it's my upbringing or not, like, find things like the Christian virtues good things, in the sense to like forgiveness, mercy, but also steadfastness, not neglecting your talents, etc. And um, at the end of the day, it's whether you believe in some sort of metaphysical prompt, right? Like, do you believe in the true, the beautiful, and the good, and the pursuit of those things? And so, like, yeah, is it good to turn the other cheek to evil brother, or to fight them with virtue, but in order to show them mercy procedurally, right? Like, and those are the answers of society. Those are the complicated answers. And I think we were kind of getting to it when we were talking about how this is I think it was Louisa who said, was it you or was it Louisa who talked about that this was like the beginning of the liberal experiment in Russia, was trying to like to sort of answer these questions um, before modernity. And still today, the liberal tradition is dealing with the fact that from the Enlightenment, truth became very elusive, and like the pursuit of it is not very easy. And like I've been like very long-winded, but in order to say like the ultimate virtue, in my opinion, even as a non-theist, is the principle of earnesty, to go about things in good faith, because this is like the discovery of reality, whatever reality is. And like that's one of the lessons, one of the main themes of Karamazov, I think, from the beginning of the conversation, was the idea of pure earnesty, at least in good faith.
Yeah, that's what I
At least to
say.
have
And
your at least to have your principle, but also to believe in a principle.
that's why I think, yeah, I think it's a main theme of the book, of how, even beyond any sort of theological perspective or lens, virtue is a thing that can be applied even just as a symbol, even just as a thought that can be in any human being, no matter what they believe, no matter who they are. And I think that it's something that I think we've said this also, like, that related to the latest acid episode of how, I was responding of how, it's like the totality, the absolutist. I try not to think of that too much because I know that's an impossibility. As much as I really, really, really want to believe it, I know it's just like the realist side of me like knows it's impossible. But something that is always possible is just someone. And like, we all can be someone. We all know someone that is someone, and maybe that someone is enough for our lives, and that can be applied to anyone anywhere in the world. That, when you have these values, or you have, you know something that is true to you, that you stick by, and it helps you live with your life. And if you have that, and if you don't contradict yourself, and if you don't get consumed by these, like, these hedonistic obsessions that become inhuman, then I think that can be a good start to anyone, because we need to start off with something very small. We need to start off, and maybe it will always be something, quote, of a small, like, group that we will only personally know, in our small circles wherever we are in the world. But I know for me that's enough.
I find that in response to what Jay was asking of, like pragmatically, what do we do? I think that relating it to the book, ultimately Dostoevsky gives us a very clear path of an option that, yeah, if you just do this, then you'll solve it. You'll be a spiritual being and you will live life with goodness, and that will solve everything. That will give you all of the answers that you need. I think that we did kind of like a proto conversation of this on the most recent Acid episode, and I think that ultimately it is just that. What I find the novel speaks of is that it's actually not very difficult to come up with a solution for it if you do approach it with an absolutist perspective, like Alyosha does. Alyosha says, yeah, I mean, we can see he's not the person of rationality, he's not the person of appetite, he's just purely spiritual. And then by doing that, he's actually able to treat people with reverence, he's able to treat people with love. And that is an answer that Dostoevsky gives us. It's not a difficult answer, but we as human beings just struggle with it. And I think that's where the turmoil from all of the characters comes from, is that the answer is right in front of them. It's clear as day that Alyosha is the best of all of them, but we just don't want to sacrifice our appetites and our greed and our rationality, even if we can recognize so clearly that they're getting in the way of us being moral and just doing good things, which is what we're all kind of striving to do. And so if we want to do something, all we would just have to do is do the good thing and never think about it. And then we would solve it. We would all be good all the time.
And yeah, I think that's also that's what's important about the novel, is also, like, it's not just a Christian novel. I think that it also, we already elaborated on this, but it's also like, okay, even if there is no God, everything is permissible, question mark?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what's important, um like, Dostoevsky is sort of making this, like, what you're getting at, that if we can imagine a world where we act good, and we can imagine a world where there's a second resurrection, isn't it a world where we live in eudaimonia and flourishing and good spirit? And so, if that is the case, why not?
Yeah.
You
think
like,
It's Dimitri's dream as well with the baby, isn't it? Why we're not loving each other
Yeah.
all the time. It's also like a not necessarily like a hyper Christian perspective at that point. And I think even Ivan, when he looks at Smirdyakov and the conclusion of his thought, he also trembles, right? Like
Mhm.
he doesn't necessarily likes that he thinks those things, I think. And that's why I think he's a redeemable character, even though he loses his mind in the end. I still think that his soul was redeemed because the guilt he
I
felt.
I think that like I said earlier, what Smerdyakov did is more than just it almost is permissible. That's the thing. Is that his crime, even in his dishonesty, in his murder, it almost is. Right? It's not permissible. I shouldn't say that. It's understandable. Right? And
Yes,
but
exactly. Because
and
of
we
guilt.
shouldn't confuse the two. Um but it's like he's not just an agent of pure evil, so to speak. Although, sometimes people describe him that way. I don't really think so. I think
No,
if I
no.
lived his life, I would also be filled with fucking with his emotions.
Well, that's exactly. Well, I think that exactly, and I think the reason for why he becomes the way he becomes is because, like the chapter that we're introduced to Smerdyakov. I mean, Dostoevsky describes him in such an interesting way that it's like he's not even aware that he's not contemplating about anything.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's
It's almost
it's like
autistic.
yeah, it's like he has no thoughts about having no thoughts. He is like
Right.
he could be anything, and the reality is that he's latched onto something, and that just happens to be Ivan. And he does encapsulate this idea of everything is permissible, precisely because of this idea that like with Ivan, it's not as though Smerdyakov is an evil person. I don't think that. It's just that he fell into the category of everything is permissible because
And I think that
there was no
go ahead.
objectivity. There was no. I was just saying there was no objectivity in his moral standing because everything is permissible. Then yeah, the any kind of goodness will go out the window because goodness or badness it doesn't make any impact within his life. But if there was an objectivity within it, then there would be a standard to which he would have to obey.
And I think this is a really good way of analyzing Jay's question because, like, Smirdyakov was born in unfair terms, and they're
Yeah.
horrible, and he didn't do anything to deserve that. And Fyodor Karamazov was born into complete luck, and he's an asshole. And he's a horrible person. And
I mean, it's also the interesting thing there is that he is born to the same father, right? And he has to be a servant to them. Like it mentioned in the defense case, I think, or in some case, that is, he's a servant, but he's supposed to be equal. And he kind of becomes equal at the end. Like they kind of imply that okay, he's not a servant anymore. He lives in his own apartment, which is interesting part of it all.
Yeah.
I also think as well. So just a quick. I also think as well in relation to Smerdyakov, I think the idea that he is a product of his environment is something that's quite relevant in like secular society.
Yeah.
Because
Of course.
if you don't believe in the eternal, then yeah, everyone is going to be a product of their environment, and there will be no objective standard of morality for anyone to measure themselves against.
Yeah, and he's this weird, this weird match of this holy fool and this pure appetite, which is Fyodor, which I think it's a very interesting thing to consider as well in the sense of like the psychology of the character. He's just pure shadow, and Sean said that he's the only one that can be described as the true atheist, and I really agree with that because he's the only one that in a way is really enacting a world that there is no God.
Yeah.
He's really
to commit
enacting that.
suicide,
He's even-
especially.
Yeah,
to commit
with the suicide,
after the
absolutely.
fact and not
Yeah.
escape. He
I can't
thinks there's
imagine-
nothing left of this
There's
life
something-
for him.
I can't imagine Smerdyakov having a conversation with the devil.
Funny enough, I was going to say the same thing. And you know what's interesting? Because the devil comes and he's so, he doesn't really, he's a bit of a pompous intellectual. And, he speaks loads of like little French quotes. And we know that Smerdyakov is also trying to learn French because he wants to, I suppose, become a modern man and westernize himself, which is interesting as well.
The devil in this novel, I wonder if it was an inspiration for the Rolling Stones' Sympathy for the Devil, because it reminds me of that exact thing, which, the song is from the perspective of Lucifer telling humanity, basically, like, I was just present. You guys are responsible for all the bad shit. you know, and
Yeah.
he reminds me a lot. Not, you know, uh, maybe the Rolling Stones are cutting deeper. I mean, it's a great song, but like are cutting even deeper than I thought.
But also,
You know,
It's a great
but
song.
wouldn't the devil also say, "I'm not responsible for anything," when in fact he was the one that planted it in their brain? Isn't that exactly what the
that's
devil would
true
do?
as well, right? That's his deception, right? His lie without lying, so to speak.
Yeah.
I merely gave you the opportunity. You are of free will. Well, what does that mean? You know?
Uh, it's great hearing people of. Sorry, may I?
Yeah.
It's really great hearing about people of different I don't know, faith or whatever talk about this because, you know, when Estevan's quoting the Zosima chapters, which also spoke to me quite deeply after the tavern, um, part of it speaks to me because not only did I have like a deeply atheist part of my life that strikes with Ivan, but I now I am Catholic and Zosima is like, you know, spiritual talking like speaks to me rather deeply and but I wonder how much, you know, we ascribe to the how much depth we give to Zosima because I already believe it. So I'm interested hearing about people who are not Christian who are listening to those kinds of chapters and wondering if you know if that really defeats the Grand Inquisitor right after the fact for someone who isn't religious. Um, the and Jay, I'm also thinking about your question way back about loving other people and it's you know going back to lots of Dostoevsky's work about you know if everything is permissible then why do we suddenly feel that there are things that are not permissible. I think in that does speak to the idea of there being an objective good and when you consider that like there's a lot of questions that come in your life when you start to think about that um the when I think about loving other people, even when it's really hard to love them, it becomes it becomes a religious endeavor to me personally, and I see this a lot both as someone who goes to church because when you go to church, essentially you are in a space where everyone is on the same playing field. Like nobody is above another person when you're in church. Like it's an equalizing ground. It's a place where it's easiest to see another human being and recognize the human being in them and want to desire the best for them, even in their even in all of their like horribleness. And I see it really, especially as a healthcare worker, especially someone who works with cancer patients, because you get patients in who are in the depths of their disease and some people are really great at handling it and some people are really fucking awful to you when they get sick because they do not know how to be vulnerable and you need like loving other people it's an axiom that you need to remind yourself of if someone's being shitty to me at work I have to look on them with this like very difficult love of like in this moment this person needs me to care for them and the biggest love I can give for them is just to give them the respect of being another human being and care for them in their illness because I know that when they're being shitty to me it's not really them it's a fear that they're feeling it's not a hatred so
100%.
those are just the thoughts that came to me right away.
Yeah, I do believe that because what I
Very,
was
very well
saying
said.
earlier, like,
Go ahead. That's fine.
because I was saying earlier about like how like you know people as I was saying like relating to like archetypes or like what we perceive of it's like we can never fully like understand anyone on a deeper level. We can try and and I think ultimately like when we actually like if you just simply meet an average person as you were saying I think if you simply just know that they are human and that like anything can be nurtured into being a one particular form or another, then I think that that can lead us closer into realizing the redemption for the entire world. Even if it's just a portion that we see as our entire world.
Absolutely. Also well said.
I think that something that's elucidated by what was just mentioned and also in the novel is this the reality check that occurs with moral action, which is again you can look at it as a completely pragmatic thing and something that you have to do, in that most of the time doing the right thing will not make you feel like a better person. Oftentimes it's an incredibly arduous thing to do,
Of
and
course, it's hard.
you
Peter
very
Parker.
often have to go against your need to conform and your need to fit in, because no one necessarily wants to be the one to impose themselves as like the irony is that oftentimes what makes us good is that we don't want to tread on anyone's toes, and in order to be heroic you have to be the one person, the first person to step forward and do what is right when no one is anticipating that anyone will actually do anything at all. And I think that's the nature of Alyosha. Also, Alyosha never thinks about what he feels, he never ruminates on what he feels, he just does. And some, I mean, every other character for pages and pages, whenever a character comes in and it's their turn to speak, it is just 10, 20 pages of I feel this and this is why, and it's the cause and effect of everything that's ever occurred in their life leading to that moment, and so much expounded upon that has nothing to do with the moral action itself. It's always in the shadow of the indecision that allowed me to feel that is more powerful, that overpowers me more than the righteousness in me to actually go and do something.
And I think what you're saying is so true, especially the fact that it's hard, it's not easy, it's hard, and that the unfairness that, again, back to the conversation about Smerdyakov, and like, we speak of doing good here, and speak is so, and this is a problem with society at large. Of many of the problems is that people believe that simply thinking the good thing is being the good person, which could not be
Absolutely.
further from the truth. The even back to the Greeks and the idea of virtue, it's your habits back then more so, but I think today it's your actions, it's the things you do that make you a good person. You can't just think the right thing and then get the points for it. And the unfairness, to quote Shakespeare, I think what drives people mad in this world, when it comes to these positions, is that some by virtue fall and some by
Yeah.
sin rise. And and today, especially because we live in a society that I think is experiencing that level of nihilistic cynicism that Russia kind of had at this time, which I think makes this book so good, so ripe, why so many people come more towards Dostoevsky. Because also the thing is that our elite in particular are very modernistic and atheistic. And if our elite, our aristocracy who have power over our lives, don't have like consideration for us, that's really bad, and it looks really unfair. And that's like what's ripe for things like revolution. You know what I mean? Because Spencer was talking about like going to church, and I think of the fact that someone like John D. Rockefeller went to Baptist church, and yeah, he was like mega wealthy, super anti-competitive, probably really exploitative and fucked up, but he actually thought he would go to hell if he didn't make up for it somehow. And so like he went to Baptist church, he was involved in his community, and was like this huge philanthropist beyond effective altruism. His trusts fund education to this day. And I think we have like a really, really bad problem in the sense that you know people see the wealthy and powerful and their complete dismissal of other people. They act like Ramses in fucking Prince of Egypt. And they think that, oh, through pride and power, you're supposed to destroy yourself. and it's not happening, right? So then that's the modern atheism. It's not simply not believing in God, it's seeing that what we believe as virtue not be rewarded. And that's very,
Yeah.
very dangerous. And I think
I
that's why the world Dostoevsky envisions here is just as important, you know?
But also not being punished on the other side, right? Like it's one thing to reward one behavior, but also not punish the other behavior. But you kind of mentioned it, but just to
Yeah.
part of it. The,
What
the,
what
the
were you
most
gonna say,
frustrating
Louis?
part of it, I guess, you just look at it. Oh, look, they can get away with it. It means I can get away with it too. It's just like
Right.
especially now, you could see it in US that I don't know. I've seen a couple of studies and I've heard it from people working in the service that in the last couple of years, the service, like working in the service, got worse. People are more assholish than before because it's just more normalized now. It's like, okay, I'm entitled to get good treatment in the restaurant, and you better treat me good and stuff like this. While
Yeah.
it's encouraged, like, oh, look, the elite is assholes and they're fine. Why am I supposed to be good and stuff like this?
Yeah. And it's
Mhm.
like, because like on the surface, me as sort of like, I consider myself a liberal, like a capital L liberal. And in that sense, I don't have a problem with an aristocracy or an elite, especially by virtue, a real meritocratic one. But even not that, a class of persons trained in rulership per se, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. My problem is there is no noblesse oblige without consideration for the metaphysical, right? That's the English concept. A very Burkean idea, I guess, that's being more conservative, but just to like dabble more in the topic. What were you gonna say, Lewis?
Well,
Do you
it was
think
in
that Dostoevsky
relation
would be
to
impressed if the liberals were saying how much they love Dostoevsky?
Yeah.
well, that kind of brings me to it, because in relation to what like Fergus said, like mentioning Rockefeller and everything, of like, okay, I have to go to church and whatnot. I mean, this might be my Faustian side coming into it and over intellectualizing it, but I'm trying to imagine how Dostoevsky would also look at that, because isn't that also a kind of bargaining with one's morality, in the sense that, okay,
Yeah, right. They're doing
yeah,
the
God look at
Pascal.
me. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bit by Patrice O'Neill where he is on an airplane and he said, you know, I'm only a Christian when I'm on airplanes. That's when I pray to God. And he's like,
Right,
when
in a
he's on the
foxhole.
plane, when he's on the plane, he'll like help an old woman with her bag. And then like once the plane's landed, she'll look at him and say, "Oh, will you get that for me?" He's like, "No, the plane landed. I did my job." And it's kind of like,
And I think like even that little consideration is preferable to what I think we see today with the tech
well,
billionaire.
I agree, but isn't that also, if we want to bring it to the novel, isn't that also the equivalent of Grushenka saying, "But I gave an onion"?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think you're correct. And I think like to measure the sincerity of people's hearts, what is that? The measurement of the heart um is I suppose difficult, right? Between how earnest was John D. Rockefeller when he went to Baptist church and prayed, if he also was ruthless anti-competitiveness, who he both destroyed lives and he made lives. I mean, he's just a guy that you can write about, any sorts of people in a position of power. And I just more back to that point, if we live in a world where we're more cognizant of virtue, then maybe we can be more sincere, even with those who are maybe entitled even unfairly to more power than others. Maybe they could be more grateful to God, and we can actually see that sincerity if we lived in a world that was more self conscious about that. I don't know, but I kind of don't think that we do now. And that's what bothers me.
Hmm. Uh,
Does that
Carol
make
also
sense
just came in.
as
Yeah,
part of
yeah, I
the
was just saying,
conversation?
oh yeah, I was gonna say how Carol just came in. So, Carol, did you have anything to say? I'm assuming no.
Carol, our -1.
Oh my
Carol.
God! Sorry.
No,
Oh,
no, he came
it's
back
back.
to invite you to
Eh,
come to speak. Maybe it froze.
It's fine. He can come.
Type in the chat if you're trying to talk, Carol.
Oh, he's back.
This
Oh,
yes. So yeah, my mic didn't work.
oh,
Uh,
hi, Carol.
so like I wanted to tie that back to like the entire discussion. Also like a bit about what the book is about. There's like the
hmm
entire discussion. Yeah, is it the liberals or the conservatives? And like that's a judgment of the father. Is he like
Yeah.
good or bad? And like what things should be altered? And then there
Mhm.
is a part like the defense of Fyodor Dostoevsky himself.
Right.
You can see him, and so you can judge him. And I think that is somewhere for me like a part that makes peace with Ivan. But at the same
Mm.
time, like the two sides, they are staring at each other, but there are like mere images and like as a person you can do your own actions, but there is also the judgment of the father. And like you look at his behaviors based on that, is he good or bad? And like we can scream about like in which factions they belong, or you can just look
hmm
at the actions and the deeds, because in the end it's all about the babe. And in this postmodern world, these are still real people. Yes. And so for me, this is like the biggest defense of like I appreciated this book so much. They're reading it this time. Is it was like pure in its honesty that like yes, you're given the bag of nuts, and this allows you to understand or to perceive it, and also to judge. And again, this is for me also. It's like not only the judgment of Russia, but also like very old living tree. I think like when Dostoevsky refers to like Hamlet or like to Schiller or like to the Jesuits, it's really not in such an antagonistic or like attacking manner. It's like more
Yeah, I
like
agree.
parallel branches which show exactly the same problems and the same struggles, and like this generational aspect of like how the political overstructure works and how it's evaluated time after time again. This is part of the redemption why how it works is acceptable, because it gives this transparency to everyone that wants to see look at it. Anyway, I just wanted to say that for me the entire liberal against conservatives, it's like one side they make a lot of shitty deals, but they don't see what they're doing. The other side makes even more shitty deals, but they say, yeah, we want to show everyone, but that like it's a very strange dance with the devil sometimes. It's almost like the miners hymn. If you forget above the ground, we go underground and we start churning the flames, and then you will remember that we are there and also be able to see us. Anyway,
hmm
I don't know why I said these strange things, but yeah,
No, it's
because
great.
No, well,
Very interesting.
well put. I mean,
the miners
this
hymn.
story, this story alone, again, it's like there's a little of everything in here. Even thinking just down to, let's say, parliamentary political sort of conventions, and at the time, and also like it's also it's so interesting how Russia was at this time. Also, I didn't just compare it to today. Like, I think it's not only apt, but I also think it's interesting how they this was very recently. I think after Alexander II, who freed the serfs, and then the judicial reforms were for is where jury trials come from, and to
Yeah.
see like a lot of sort of the common law that is enshrined in our rights in the Western world happen in his trial too. The beyond reasonable doubt standard, the fact that in court we have that standard because we would rather 100 guilty person be free over one innocent person be falsely accused. And like hearing those the procedures work out that way, I'm like, damn, like Russia was actually like quite very fledgling. Of course, this is very new, but like very a society at least trying to be very enlightened at the time. trying
Yeah,
to
and
make up
And
for
also
probably. Go ahead.
I
similar
was just
about
saying,
dogs on doctor thing. I don't remember Uncle one who always comes like, oh, nothing to do. The phrase to everybody. It's so good that trash
Jay,
all
stop.
the other things.
Stop. Your mic is so bad.
Jay, your internet is bad wherever you are. You have to start that over. But like you need better internet. Turn it like go on your Wi-Fi or go on and off. You went through a tunnel or something.
unplug yourself.
Unplug yourself from the
Oh, hey guys, I
matrix.
just want to let you guys know that I'm gonna have to take off. But I loved this conversation, and then I look forward to the next book club. But yeah, I have
Of
to
Absolutely.
course.
go.
I
Yeah,
kind of
same,
don't
man.
look forward to the next one because it's gonna be rage. But whatever.
It
At
was
least
great
I'm
to hear from you,
anticipating
Brian.
rage.
Take care,
For
Brian.
sure. Thank you.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.
I was just thinking, Forrest, in relation to what you were saying. Also, it's like, we're in this era of Russia where people are really trying, and it's so tumultuous. Like, just the idea that, can you imagine reading the Brothers Karamazov and seeing such an enlightened perspective from Dostoevsky, and then a few months later he dies, and then a couple months after that the Tsar is assassinated.
I know, it's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Dostoevsky is Zosimas.
Fucking crazy on the on the timeline. Like the Penguin version of this book has like a timeline of his life,
Yeah,
which like puts that into perspective, which is kind of crazy.
yeah. We've got two editions. We've got the Penguin one, and we've got the Folio Society one.
Who's the translator on the Folio Society one?
I don't know.
Isn't that the Constance Garnett an original translation?
Yeah,
I think
so
so. Let me double check.
I actually think that the Garnet holds up really fucking well. It's really good. But the newest one, which is by a guy named Michael Katz, is fucking excellent. I like Pavir and Volkowski because it gives me like they've translated so much shit and they're very like kind of literal with a lot of footnotes. So
See,
I
the
kinda,
actually the Folio Society is translated by David Magashak.
David Magashak. Okay, there's another translator named David McDuff, who I actually don't like that much, but he's liked in academia. I have not heard Magashaft, but
The Penguin one is by Macduff.
is by David McDuff. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't like the Penguin one that much. I prefer Pavir and Volkowski. I think the Michael Kotz like newest one, which is the one I read this time, I think is really really good. And there's one that I've read parts of. It's by Oxford Classics. You know, the white covers with the red letters. That it's actually translated in this. It's by a man named Reedy, and it's actually the Karamazov brothers. It's not the brothers Karamazov. You know, it's the Karamazov brothers. That's how like kind of meticulous he was trying to translate the book.
I
And trying
remember
to put it
that.
into like a modern swing.
I remember that the first time I read Crime and Punishment, it was like directed from the Constance Garnett translation, and I assumed that was just from then on. I assumed that was going to be the go-to translations for most of the work. I thought that was going to be the most common one, but it doesn't seem to be that.
She translated a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Today, because the people who do the Penguin like vintage classic stuff, Pavir and Volkowski's like Russian library is just massive. They have Master Margarita, they have all of Bulgakov, they have all of Turgenev. They've just done everything. And so Macduff is like a very academic person. I mean, Penguin hired him. And you know, Penguin is class. Like if you choose literature, you choose Penguin. I just never really liked it that much. I don't think it never flowed well to me. I read his Notes from Underground most recently. I think catching up, I wasn't at the first book club, but like I read it kind of and then listened to you guys. And on that one, I read the Macduff one and I didn't like it. But you know, that was just You know, because the Garnet translations totally hold up. They're great, and
Yeah.
she is ridiculous what she was able to do.
I know,
So
yeah.
much translating.
And
Yeah,
she
it's crazy.
essentially fucking like she
She's
basically
the
brought
reason why we
Dostoevsky's
have
awareness in the
Russian
West.
literature in
Yeah.
English.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's literally the reason why.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's a shame we can't do these book clubs every week.
I know, dude. One like Brothers Karamazov was like, I mean,
There's
bro,
some
this book is this book.
I know. It's, yeah, it was like from last year because like we had gaps and everything, but we wanted to ensure like we can do at least one a month. And but part of it is also like the planning and whatnot, because I understand like fucking not everyone has the time to read a book a week, and even with that, like we would really have to plan what we would fit in.
Yeah, of course.
You have to correct stories.
Yeah, I mean, literally, the next longest one is Gravity's Rainbow this year.
Yeah, that book is tough. We're all gonna have fun reading it, but it's really freaking funny. So, you know,
I'm curious.
Yeah, does anyone else have anything else to add about the book, or should we migrate?
I just have like one thing. I just want to just say some like a random thing. Like one of my favorite lines, probably like my favorite line that just felt like the most Russian line of the book. I'm just trying to find it. It's like, fuck. I put a pin on it.
I was gonna say, I hope you like marked it, because if you were literally trying to flip through page by page to find it.
The Galloping Troika. Like I could talk about that, man. Dead Souls.
Yeah.
The idea of, you know, Russia will inherit Russia will save Europe in a sense.
I love that towards the end as well. You know, like because we haven't spoke about Louisa and I mentioned it about how much of a Slavophile that Dostoevsky is, and even like the notion that Mitya at the end, that he's declaring he wants the Russian god.
Yeah. Or the prosecutor and the defense attorney having these visions of the troika, because in a sense they're also like, what's also on trial is the future, how we see, you know, the how we're gonna treat the world, and the idea that like we're gonna, you know, the prosecutor is, no matter what, Russia's fucking coming, and the defense attorney is like, you know, we come with precision, I wrote it in the chat actually, which is that again the prosecution is filled with rationale. It's completely rational that Mitya is the murderer. However, the defense comes with principles of justice, of guilty until proven innocent. And this is the clash. This is the clash in the novel and of the family and of the future.
Yeah.
Speaking of
and Jay mentioned as well in the chat also the idea that like it's good on principle and value, but from a law standpoint, it's not a good defense.
Yeah, it's not. The prosecution's case is way better. He comes to criticize the pieces of evidence. Yeah. Which is what a defense attorney does.
By the way, I found
Sen, also, if you want to come in, you can raise your hand and I can invite you in. Go on, Jay.
It also interesting place. Can you hear? Okay.
Go ahead, Jay.
Everyone's just talking at the same time.
I was just
that you rationalize the fence and you're talking the whole rationalization over the stuff, right? It's easier to rationalize and defend the murder, because they were rationalizing about making the murder, and then when they were prosecuting, they were also rationalizing, versus the other way around, which is a really fun way.
Anyways, I found the quote that's probably my favorite. It's when like Mitya says this to Ayoshka, like near the end, where it's like he says the Karamazovs are not blackguards but philosophers, for all true Russians are philosophers, and though you studied, you are not a philosopher, you are a low fellow. And I said to him, isn't that rather good? It's like that is like the most Russian line I've ever read in my entire life.
Yeah, Sen, you're in. It's your time to shine.
Yeah, hello guys. So I just wanted to say hi since it's my first time in the book club. And
Welcome.
I don't really have much other things to say that hasn't already been said. But I think the lowest hanging fruit of interpretation is the Freudian one, no? Since
Right.
all the three brothers can be interpreted as id, which is Dimitri, is like the savageness, yeah. And yeah, the rest is quite obvious. And I think about Freud, it's also about the Freudian interpretation is also about how their father influences their life. And you guys said that Ivan and Alyosha didn't have a mother figure, but I think their mother was portrayed by Alyosha at least to be quite a chaste lady, a pure lady. I think there was something like she was praying to Holy Mother, I think. It was something like that, and her name is Sophia, which means love, also. So there is
Great
like
character in Crime and Punishment also.
yeah.
Love the name
Uh,
Sophia.
So there is the schism between this and Fyodor, which also ended abusing her to death, I believe, or something. So yeah, and also the one thing that I wanted to say is about the alcohol and the metaphor of being drunk, because there is a lot of
We
this
haven't even
stuff being
talked about the alcohol, bro. Alcohol is so important in this book. God damn it. We haven't said anything.
yeah, and I think it's pointed out when Alyosha has a dream of Cana, yeah, when Jesus turned the water into wine, I believe it was.
Yeah.
So I think that everyone in this novel drinks wine and gets drunk by the wine, but Alyosha actually what he drinks is the transformed wine, which is the blood of Jesus, and that's why he's so godly.
Transubstantiated.
Yeah. So everyone is so focused on the bodily stuff and the carnal stuff, while Alyosha is more on the sacred side, yeah, the transcended side, and he's
Metaphysics.
also like an angelic figure throughout the novel. So yeah, that's a couple of things that I wanted to say, and I think that Zosima's death also symbolizes the reaction to Zosima's death, and the order also symbolizes the Russian society and their take on church, which is the church that does many good things to the society and tries to influence it the best way possible, but the society hangs on the things that are bad but are just in the minority. So yeah, that I think also what it was, and the beauty of Dostoevsky is that he can transform these particular things into the universal. So I think it's just the greatness of these kind of writers, and I also think that this novel is very inclusive. So when you take it as at its face value, you can read it like an almost like a crime novel or something like this. Or, I
A
mean,
murder
the
mystery.
characters, yeah, the characters are so real that if they have spawned in my room, I would have felt like I've known them for like a couple of years.
Yeah.
So, and also the trial was, I think someone said that it was the least enjoyable part of the novel, for the least easy thing to enjoy in this novel, but I found it very enjoyable because also when you try to take it on the face value, at the face value, you can treat it also almost like an anime battle of wits, no? The prosecutor and the defender, like Ace Attorney, something, you know?
Yeah.
I literally thought that as I was reading it.
Written.
Yeah.
Same. It's very like melodramatically written. It's like that Norman Jewison movie. What was it called? And Justice
Which
for
one?
All.
Oh yeah.
You're out of order. The whole courtroom's out of order with like their little like snide comments and you know.
I mean, I think it's that as well, Sen. Though, like you said, you know, one of the aspects of the trial. I think that people have a strong reaction to it because a lot of people say that they love it and they're enthralled, and a lot of people really struggle. And I think the struggling aspect is because it's essentially recounting to you 800 pages worth of things that you've experienced before, but especially from the prosecution, there's so much of it that you know is incorrect that it becomes kind of an arduous thing to go to replay things over again, especially when there's some incorrect statements within there. And I think that's kind of like a moralist test that Dostoevsky's putting us through of, you know, we're hoping that there's going to be some strong catharsis at the end of this, and the justice is going to be served, but the idea that when the jury come back and Mitya said yes, guilty, it's just this idea that you've heard so much of it and you've known so much of it has been wrong, and yet it still was seen as lawfully correct.
Yeah, when I said that I didn't enjoy that part as much, it was mostly the length of the prosecutor's speech, and just like what you said, it was like reiterating a lot of stuff and things that we knew weren't true, but at like such a length. And also knowing that, you know, the narrator hints that Mitya gets found guilty, which I do wonder if the guilty sentence would have landed better if he didn't set it up for that. But regardless of whether or not we know that he's guilty by the end, it's still hit, like I said, like they spend so much time on the prosecutor's speeches and then it's like boom, guilty, and he just starts sobbing after all of that.
Dude, at the very end of this book, bro, I remember the first time I read it, when that guilty hits, I get goosebumps. I'm like, no fucking way. And then when you turn from the epilogue chapter 2 to epilogue chapter 3 and you read epilogue chapter 3 saying the funeral of Alyusheshka, fucking hits your fucking soul, dude, because then you remember like, oh my god, he died. Like, you know.
And it was that because you know when you read this book and you're going through it for the first time, and it's like the trial's about to begin. All right, I'm in the final part of the book, and then it's just the boys, and I'm like, wait a minute, what's happened?
I love that so much. I love that change. It's so good. It's brilliant, really. We never spoke about Kolya as well.
I know, and I love him. I love that character. I love
He's such a great character.
It was also a great break between everything else as well. You know, like having that section in the book to break up all the insanity of Dmitri getting caught.
Because don't you feel that like the first 700 pages, like it just I remember I was saying to Louise, like going through again, it was just this idea that, you know, it feels as though everything's occurring in one day because everything just keeps going and going and going. And then by the time that we hit the boys, it's like, you know, I kind of needed this break away from all this drama.
Yeah.
Of course. I also think this book is actually a very easy read. I think anybody can read it. I think the chapters are short. You can take your time with it. The language, it's just long. That's all it is.
Super accessible. I think it's super accessible. I think
it's not like
but look at the TV shows. How long the TV shows take? Like there's 7 seasons of whatever the fuck, and then each season has whatever 10, 12 episodes. And if you add it, like if you compare it to a movie, like maybe, but if you compare it to TV show and actually not, don't have to rush for 1 or 2 months. But if you take it over the year and you just read a couple of things, a week, I
Of
think
course.
you can enjoy it definitely.
But,
Yeah.
but
When I
there is a
was
big
very
difference
young, I
between
thought
sitting for an hour. There is a big difference between sitting for an hour and reading a book and engaging for the layman than sitting down and watching an hour of a show that doesn't take any thought whatsoever.
Yeah, especially one of those
Yeah,
Netflix ones
but
that
if you,
reiterates the plot 3 times or whatever.
I don't
Or
know.
you
I mean,
saying?
it's hard. It's hard to look at your
This
phone
book
and at the book at the same time.
That's true.
Well, guess what? Checkmate. I read
requires
the
a
entire
huge
book
amount.
either in my computer or my phone. So
Wait,
it's-
wait, guys. Carol's trying to say something.
I recall talking about this book with the teacher when I was very young, and he mentioned that something very specific is that the book starts out so dull and confusing that it almost shrugs off uninterested readers. And also that it takes quite a number of pages before you actually get to the really stuff, unless you're already in tune with it. And like he said, it was like, for him, it was almost like a device or like a protective warden to avoid too much hassle. And that this was actually quite common if you looked at other books throughout history. But like, sorry, you can say a lot, but like, you will not give a book of 900 pages in high school unless you have a very special school. It is, it's not a normal read.
Mhm.
So
I
yeah,
like that.
you can say it's easy and accessible, but like in reality, population or humans I ever met, you don't give this, or people don't dig into it unless they really want to and say, I will do this. It is, it's a marathon. It's not a walk in a park.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the language itself,
Interesting.
like,
But
it isn't that hard to read, but, just like structurally speaking, like when you get to somewhere like the Grand Inquisitor, where it's like there's a section that's 10 pages with no paragraph break, there is something exhausting about reading something
Have
like
you
that.
have you read
know?
Krasnahorkai?
Have I read which?
Krasnahorkai.
We're about
The
to in
guy-
the book club this year.
Yeah, get prepared to it. Prepare to it.
I'm very excited for that. I'm very, very
I'm excited for that.
But it's
though.
interesting that this book is kind of starts not that complicated, right? It gives you biography and backgrounds, and it's kind of slow.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's slowish for the first part, and then quickly it goes to the church. And then it's ridiculous and funny right away to me. I don't know. It's hard for me.
Which is funny
But
because
people like somebody says it's
glitching
complicated for
again.
them.
Oh, it's not
Yeah.
complicated, but it's like, oh, I don't know.
which is I'm saying it's funny because like I would say, in my opinion, the closest thing I think we have to an inciting incident that you would usually see, like, you know, in a 3-arc thing, like the closest thing we have to a traditional inciting incident for me is when Dimitri's trying to get the money and then like he gets arrested, which is like what 700, 800 pages. It's like it's a pure like I think it's like a pure like it's not like really a traditional arc drama. It's just very character focused. It's not narrative focused, which I think I think that's why like it is so resonating for me. Is just because they have such contrast, and there's always something interesting that they say, even if there's no overarching narrative that aligns with them. It's just people that have to speak to other people and learn more about them. That is the meat. That is what makes it compelling on a basic level, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Damn.
Yes,
I
and like
think.
I
mean,
think that we might reached our longest book club ever.
Bro, I
I
could.
think
Oh,
It was inevitable.
How much was the Hamlet one?
Just like a little under 3 hours. The longest one is Brave New World, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it's like 3 hours and 3 minutes. We're about to pass it right now if we keep on talking a bit.
Blah 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 blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Hello,
Um,
Humpty Dumpty.
I like when they reference Dante. I like when they reference Shakespeare. That's my analysis.
He references Schiller. You know, Bernards. What is it? He calls people Bernards.
Oh, I love the Bernards. Bernard, if you look
Okay,
at,
can
like
someone
the
actually Yeah, can someone talk about that? Like, what? Because I'm such an idiot. What was the meaning of that?
Bernard is actually a reference to like there is like a scientist pseudo, like he's selling like curing potions, and he said like, yeah, if you approach life scientifically and you take this walk in life, you will have like a good life. But it's like a complete sham, and it's almost like a like
Snake oil salesman.
yes.
It's let me get you
You're
the
just selling a
reference.
truth. It's just it sounds truthful, but it's like completely not truthful, and you're just trying to make the gain of what you're aiming for. It's not.
Let me see if I can find it because they have in the Pevier and Volkowski version. There's like the footnote directly gives you the story. I
Well, they
always
meant-
love that Schiller poem about the rider on the back of the horse that's dying, the brother. I love that one.
When in the Pavir Volkonsky version, because that's what I read too, it just mentions like the name of the scientist. So, but I still like just from him and like what he studied, I wasn't able to kind of gather like I just couldn't remember like why Dimitri was just shouting Bernards to everybody.
He's calling them fucking, what's the correct term? Not a purloiner, but a charlatan, a scam artist. Bernards.
Would you read this book again?
Absolutely.
Like all of you,
Yes.
like
Yeah, but like
Especially
10 years
Not
later.
everything with
Re-
Ayosha and Zosima. That to me is like some of like the most intriguing character stuff I've ever seen in fiction. I like anytime it just focused on Zosima, Mav, and Ayosha. It's like this is peak fiction.
Yeah.
in the introduction to the book that I had, it says you need to read it to appreciate it. If you don't read it 3 times, you something you have not read it right, or you don't appreciate it.
I hate that.
That's
only
Because it's
happening
like
in
I
books.
was saying, like you know, if a true like all the true classics can be enjoyed, I think, at some surface level, and they get better the more you read them.
Yeah,
I agree.
That only happens
This
to me
is-
once.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
only happens
I
to
think
me once.
Nabokov said it, no? Nabokov said it about books, and he hated Dostoevsky.
He didn't like Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
I know,
I remember
I know.
reading that. I remember reading that the other day.
Because he had like a very
somebody shared
clear-
his page that he didn't like anybody, and he had witty remarks about everybody.
He liked Kafka. he had a very like he had a very steadfast idea of what a good novel was. And so with all the Dostoevsky like melodrama, he thought it was like boring. Cause like, you know, he's like under the impression that like literature has to like be both like grammatically interesting and like he also he throws shades at some like hardcore Americans too. But I mean, you know,
That just reminds
child
me.
prodigy Vladimir Nabokov. You know?
That just reminds me of how like Zizek describes his favorite Hitchcock as Psycho, of how it's like, you know, it's simply the best. Psycho is so good. It's like Vertigo, it's a bit too romantic. Psycho is just so perfect.
But the thing is, like, Nabokov is everything that he stood for as well, though, like the way that he thought literature should be. I mean, that is his writing style. Like, he did stand by it.
He lives his truth 100%.
We can do Pale Fire for the next book club next year.
Yeah, I have it. I read it like when it came out in Blade Runner 2049, so like 2017. That is one of the weirdest things I've ever read, Pale Fire, because it's like literary criticism and a story at the same time.
Yeah,
it's kind of it's interesting. I haven't read Penin, but I'm interested in it. I heard that his first novel is actually very good and actually like a little melodramatic. It's called like Mishika, I think. I actually hear it's pretty good. It has like romance and stuff.
Also,
I mean,
guys,
Lolita got a little romance too. But
I wanted to ask you guys if you have any insights about Katerina, because I don't really feel I have something to say about this character, so maybe you guys have some
Well,
insights.
Lewis was talking about her impulsivity, complimenting Dimitri, and I like that. I was also saying about how like she's clearly like marrying her is superior, which is why like Ivan feels the need to try to like swoop. He feels like he can like level up in class by marrying her, and like the kindness that Dimitri shows her ends up both giving him his first fiance, but also like it's like the first stone in the snowball of his life. Um, gosh, she as a character is just like how do you deal with her? How do you as Dimitri? And I feel like that's another like that's part of more of the theme of Brothers Karamazov. Like, how do you have her come to you and tell you, "Oh, I didn't mean it," when I fucking
Yeah.
probably sealed your fate at the
The
trial?
reality is also though, like when you also think of the stuff that ultimately Katya has been put through by Dmitri and Grushenka, she's also a character that suffered quite a lot at their
And
hand.
by the
So
way,
it is a vengeful act.
she did that at the trial to save Ivan
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Ivan, she was under the impression that Ivan saying that he murdered his father was going to get him in trouble as like a confederate with Smerdyakov in this theory. Like it was like people were going to take that literally. So she said that and brought up the note in order because she loves Ivan.
She
Truly.
sacrificed herself 2 times.
Yeah.
First,
I
in
guess you could
showing her
say.
own humility for
Mhm.
Dimitri and revealing the secret, and then afterwards for Ivan. And it's not irrational, it's a passionate, and it's like, yeah.
And I guess that's why she's a good comparison to Dimitri, interestingly enough, working on these passions.
She's one
And
sacrifice short of a trinity.
and at the end, like that, the duo of Ivan and Katya, that Alex actually says in the future.
Mhm. What'd you say about the future?
That at the end of the story, there's like a scene where Alex says, Ivan and Katya are the future.
Mhm.
I recall that sentence.
I also like her relationship with Grushenka is also like intriguing because they're like, well, first how the way that Grushenka confronts her in the jail at the end. It's actually like quite short because Dimitri says basically, back off, don't do anything crazy right now. I like it leaves you a little open ended. Like, do you think they end up breaking out? They say it'll be easy. I imagine that he does escape, right? Like, and I
I think
wonder.
if he does escape, it kind of undoes his redemption, I think.
I think that it does. That's the problem. Is that like
because it's as
I
though
feel like
he is
he has
like
to
he's a
volunteer,
sacrificial
even
lamb, isn't he?
Yeah.
right for truth,
It's like
as Kolya says.
Raskolnikov at the end of Crime and Punishment.
Yeah, and when Kolya says, "Oh, how I'm jealous of him," I want to be like that. I want to be like a martyr for truth, basically. And then, Alyosha's like, "All right, the kids are all right, I guess." Not bad. Like,
And at the same time, it's also Alyosha who says that, like, you are not meant to do this sacrifice in a sense, or like, or
To
it's not
Dimitri,
appropriate for
yes.
you.
You don't have to go to the mines. Oh, that's so beautiful. Also, adored that passage. That's for Ivan.
I say that, but I still want to see my Raskolnikov and Dmitri Prison Break spin-off. Let's go!
So I wrote this in the chat. I think there are notes of a sequel. Obviously, it's not legit because he died before. And I remember reading somewhere that Ivan is married to Liz in the future.
Huh?
Oh,
That's
with
wild.
figures. Yeah, no. Lisa and Katarina, they are so alike in nature.
Like, I remember seeing that. Someone could double check me, but on the notes for, because there was supposed to be a sequel. He died before it could be completed, obviously. But obviously that would all be completely unofficial because it's not like he had that much time. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm just seeing like all these
I think-
articles. Like, just a lot of
I'm hearing.
But I
I'm
mean, he
hearing
didn't know
Google.
that he's gonna die so soon, right? Like he was like 5 to 10 years, whatever. He was trying to heal himself from whatever he had, but it's not like he knew he's gonna suddenly die.
Not only that, the Brothers Karamazov was first published as like a weekly serial, wasn't it? It was like
that's
a
what
chapter
I was
in a
about to ask.
newspaper.
That's why it's so long, also, no? Because I think he was paid for a page or something.
Like L. Ron Hubbard, who like wrote like 100,000 words.
Makes those days.
Bro,
I think it's worth mentioning too. Like, I know I mentioned this in chat already, but like at least the one of the strengths of the version of the book I read is like all the footnotes about like really specific authors that he's mentioning and like poking fun at them in a way and assigning them to characters that
absolutely.
Yeah,
he has a
and-
dialogue on his opinion of Russian
It's-
or like artists at the time.
Exactly. Like, so like those people and critics of him, and of course like the talking about, you know, Russia in general and its future, and really just how incredible he was able to do that. But at the same time, he's so good at writing characters and dialogue that all the dialogue feels like real speech from a person. Whereas like you read some books, like I read some rom-coms last year just as like in between serious stuff, and you read it and you can tell that this person like they thought up something like really what they thought was really clever, and instead of putting it on Twitter they decided that this will be something silly that my character says, but it doesn't, like, it just sounds like the author saying something. It doesn't sound like the character really saying something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're going to say that exact same thing again when we read James Joyce.
I bet, yeah. Yet when? Oh yeah, Portrait Artist, I forgot, yes.
It's only like
What's up?
in May.
But that one is good though.
Jay's not excited for it though. Listen, Esteban, did you manage to record everything, by the way? Because we stopped halfway through because the fucking echo.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. Now our book club is at the same runtime as the acclaimed film Avatar: Fire and Ash.
But now you have to join his Patreon and pay for his version.
I mean, so that we can all save Esteban's hard drive from exploding as well, should we pause this and go over to the Hangout?
Yeah. Are we ready for Hangout time?
Let's go, because I have some stuff as well.
Oh god.
Let's go.
See you all over there.
Okay. Okay, bye everybody.